Chapter 2141. Deep within the darkness, at the pinnacle of the heavens, a streak of light crashed down onto the sacrificial altar, creating glaring cracks on the chaotic alloy sacrificial altar before plunging viciously into it. The body of that streak of light was none other than the heaven-crushing sword, which the Purple Star Emperor had bestowed with boundless hope. The heaven-crushing sword was still inky black in color, and it looked just as flawless as before, like the most flawless work of art. However, Purple Star Emperor knew that the countless small worlds attached to the heaven-crushing sword had already been engulfed by the darkness, and the power of the Purple Star Realm and the multiverse had not been imbued upon it. So it was nothing more than a beautiful work of art. We've failed. We've truly failed. Purple Star Emperor's features were extremely pale as he looked at the scenes of destruction in the distance. Life, matter, energy, traces, karma, everything had been stripped away by the darkness. The Purple Star civilization on the flickering continent was about to be completely wiped from existence. Everything will return to darkness. Everything will return to nothingness. Is this retribution? I wanted to return the heavenly Tao to nothingness. But who would have thought that the Purple Star civilization would return to nothingness instead? Purple Star Emperor's eyes dimmed as he spoke in a self-deprecating manner. Was I really wrong? He looked up into the sky as he murmured to himself. Of course you were wrong. Purple Star Emperor, you arrogant starred. You ignored Her Majesty Nuwa's warning and insisted on leading the Purple Star civilization to your own destruction. Are you satisfied now that your entire civilization is about to be destroyed? An enraged and crisp female voice suddenly sounded. Purple Star Emperor wore a pained expression, but he had no regrets. The humans wanted to break free from the cage of heaven and earth and advance further. Was that also wrong? White Spirit Snake spoke in a cold voice. That's right, but you were wrong. Purple Star Emperor's body shuddered before he shook his head. No, we weren't wrong. This is the ultimate goal of the Purple Star civilization. We just failed. Release her. Purple Star Emperor spoke in a cold voice. The chains on White Spirit Snake's body were released. However, she did not leave. Instead, she heaved a faint sigh. What's the point of releasing me now? None of us can escape. The darkness will wipe out everything in the Purple Star Realm. Even a mighty figure at the Tao integration pinnacle stage like me has nowhere to run. She was very powerful, and it was precisely because of this that she knew exactly how terrifying and despairing the backlash of the heavenly Taos this time around was. The Purple Star Emperor picked up the giant white egg and looked at the pure and flawless woman in the egg with deep regret and pain in his eyes. Bai Ling, I'm sorry. I can't let you become a human paragon. We're leaving you forever. You can't die. The Purple Star civilization can't be destroyed. The power within Purple Star Emperor's body poured into the white eggshell like an ocean. Knowledge, information, power, Tao realm. At the same time, millions of elite human beings around the altar reached out their hands towards the giant white egg as if they were hugging it. Countless energies and knowledge started to flow into the giant white egg in the form of spiritual power. The scene was very quiet. The soundless silence carried the last hope. This was the Purple Star civilization's final effort. Block the detection of the heavenly Tao. Break free of the karmic bindings. Erase all connections. Seal the memories. Seal the power. Finally, the giant white egg that held the hopes of the entire race began to transform into a streak of light and fly into the distance. There was no darkness to chase after it, and there was no power to chase after it. Thus, it transformed into the last ray of light in the dark night sky. Countless Purple Star citizens could see that it was like a shooting star that disappeared in the blink of an eye. It had existed, it had dazzled, and it had lit up the entire night sky. But it would disappear in the end. If you have the chance, I hope you can apologize on behalf of the Purple Star civilization. Atone for your sins. Tears flowed from the corners of Purple Star Emperor's eyes as the egg flew further and further away. White Spirit Snake looked on at everything that was unfolding before her eyes. Just a minute ago, Purple Star Emperor was saying that they had done nothing wrong. Now, he was going to apologize? Could he not be so fickle? White Spirit Snake was grumbling in her heart, but she couldn't be bothered to say it out loud. This was the final moment of her life, so she was not in the mood to argue with Purple Star Emperor over such a trivial matter. The darkness was like a curtain that was about to completely engulf the Purple Star State. Boom, boom, boom. The earth rumbled. Countless defensive cannons were unleashed. This was like the final struggle of a civilization. A series of destructive cannons transformed into dazzling lights that soared into the sky before exploding into the darkness, but they were unable to cause even the slightest ripple to appear in the darkness. All of the top-grade weapons representing the Purple Star civilization were unleashed toward the darkness in an attempt to buy themselves a sliver of hope for survival. However, the darkness was like a bottomless pit. No matter what kind of attacks they launched, they would all disappear upon striking the darkness. Their retaliation was so feeble and powerless. All of the confident, prideful, and arrogant Purple Star citizens had been reduced to cowards who were filled with fear and remorse. One Purple Star citizen after another was mercilessly engulfed by the darkness. Millions, hundreds of millions, tens of billions, the once prosperous and boundless earth had been reduced to a twisted and shattered land of darkness by the darkness. The miraculous buildings, the indestructible research institutes, and the flowery mountains were all treated equally in the face of darkness. They were all reduced to the featureless, broken dust. Purple Star Emperor's eyes were moist as he looked on at the vanishing cities and their brethren, and he stood with his back straight as he looked on in silence. In the end, the darkness contracted and arrived at the core region of the heaven-crushing empire. On an ultimate sacrificial altar, tears began to well up in the eyes of the millions of elite human powerful beings. They didn't resist. All of them were silently accepting the wrath of the heavens. The darkness swept toward them like a tidal wave, engulfing all of the Purple Star elites before finally surging toward the sacrificial altar. Purple Star Emperor spread open his arms. "Come, let me see." He didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence before the darkness engulfed his body. White Spirit Snake pursed her lips as tears shimmered in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty Nuwa. I wasn't able to stop them. She didn't even get a chance to finish her sentence before her lithe and graceful body was completely engulfed by the darkness. Everything fell into darkness. A mighty civilization that was as dazzling as the brightest star had been completely engulfed by the darkness just like that. Within the void of darkness. Pitter-patter-patter, pitter-patter-patter. The sound of rain suddenly erupted. This was the sound of rain falling upon the earth. Why was it raining? Wait, no. Wasn't she already dead? White Spirit Snake opened her eyes with difficulty, and in her groggy state, she discovered that she was being held in someone's arms. Her snowy white snake tail was being held by a large hand, and her back was being supported by a warm hand. Her vision gradually became clear. There was a massive hole in the sky. It looked like a dark blue vortex with a boundless darkness at its center. Violent, fractured laws were raging. Destructive, chaotic turbulence was wreaking havoc. Purple rain fell from the sky, drenching her white dress and revealing her exquisite body. At the same time, the man with black hair and black eyes who was holding her was also drenched. Could it be that this strange man had saved her? White Spirit Snake was a little dazed. "Say, Senior." Chapter 2142. The Desolate and Cold Land of Despair. A man in black was quietly hugging a woman in white. It blocked all the nomological forces and chaotic turbulence. White Spirit Snake should have been extremely reluctant to be hugged by him. However, a peculiar sense of security made her forget to distance herself from him. Instead, she stared blankly at the man before her. "Senior, did you save me?" White Spirit Snake blinked her large, bright eyes curiously. The man sighed softly. "I'm sorry, I couldn't save you, Bam." Suddenly, a huge black hole appeared in her chest. White Spirit Snake's eyes widened as the fear of death welled up in her heart again. But at that moment, a large, warm hand pressed against her black hole. "You shouldn't have died. I only wanted to exterminate the entire Purple Star and you were trying to stop the purple star from breaking through the heavens. You shouldn't have died. The black-robed man's expression was unprecedentedly gentle. White Spirit Snake shuddered upon hearing this, and an expression of astonishment appeared on her face. You're saying you destroyed the purple star, I am heaven, or the heavenly darkness god. The man smiled with a gentle look in his eyes. This was completely different from the brutal way he had exterminated an entire race. There's another way to save you. I'll first seal your power and let you reincarnate. But I'm sorry, I have to seal your memories. The man placed his hand on White Spirit Snake's forehead. White Spirit Snake still wanted to say something, but her vision suddenly blacked out and she descended into darkness. The man used a divine technique to transform White Spirit Snake into an egg in order to evade the karmic backlash of the heavenly Tao. He placed the egg on a black lotus and tossed it into the endless primal chaos, where it floated to an unknown place. After doing all this, the man took out the black sword on his back and carefully examined it. Is this the weapon that almost killed me? Interesting. In addition to possessing the power to shatter the heaven, it also possesses the ability to mend the heavenly way. It turns out that purple star still had a way out, but it was already too late. It's clearly a sword of destruction, but it also has the healing and redemption ability to mend the heavens. Calling it the heaven-splitting sword is really unworthy of its name. The heart of the saint wins, and the desires of the masses win. Righteousness and evil chi are often separated by a single thought. Why don't you be called victorious evil from now on? You will be my sword from now on. The memory was dispelled. The memories hidden deep within the evil-slaying sword awakened, and it learned everything. Not only that, but the Darkwing Emperor also brought out a black ball and triggered the recording within it, allowing Enlin and Su Xiaolan to see the Purple Star Tribe crushing the heavens. This is something that the Heavenly Darkness God entrusted to us. He said that if we encounter the Heavenly Darkness God in the future, we have to show him the images hidden within this black ball and allow him to inherit the evil-slaying sword and black ball. Thus, Enlin witnessed the destruction of the entire Purple Star civilization. Even the appearance of the Heavenly Darkness God was clearly visible to them. The Heavenly Darkness God looked like a gentle and elegant young master. He was extremely good-looking, and he bore a slight resemblance to Enlin. What shocked Enlin the most still happened. The man in the image was obviously not him. However, this man referred to himself as the Heavenly Darkness God. What was going on? The Darkwing Emperor looked at Enlin with a serious expression. We feel that you are the reincarnation of the Sky God of Darkness. You are a part of the Heavenly Tao, and you are the Heavenly Lord that we should pledge our loyalty to. Reincarnation? So you're saying that I'm not a human? I'm the Heavenly Darkness God who destroyed the entire Purple Star civilization and slaughtered hundreds of billions of Purple Star citizens? Enlin murmured. Su Xiaolan turned to Enlin to see his confusion and uneasiness, and she spoke in a gentle voice. Enlin, I feel like there's a difference between you and the Heavenly Darkness God. You are a true life form, while the Heavenly Darkness God has most likely attached himself to your life through some kind of method. Enlin forced a smile onto his face upon hearing Su Xiaolan's words of consolation. He knew that things weren't as she thought. If he lost 1/5 of his life force, the power of darkness in the sky would increase by 1/5, which meant that his life was the Tao of darkness. In other words, he was darkness, not a human. Enlin was already mentally prepared for this. So after his identity was verified, he was only a little dazed for a moment before heaving a forlorn sigh. I'm clearly the reincarnation of the Heavenly Darkness God, so why am I getting uglier the more I reincarnate? Just how handsome was he in his past life? The Darkwing Emperor was astonished. He had never seen anyone ridicule him like this. Su Xiaolan was still trying to console Enlin, and her face flushed bright red upon hearing this. She only offered words of consolation after a long while. That's not the case. I feel like you're the best looking you've ever been. He felt like the direction of consolation had deviated in a peculiar manner. By the way, there's something else I don't understand, Enlin suddenly said. Please go ahead, heavenly leader. The Darkwing Emperor was still very respectful. And Lin looked at the proud, yet humble being before him. It wasn't darkness that created your tribe, so why did you acknowledge the heavenly darkness god as your master instead of the heavenly light god, or the heavenly life god? What is your relationship with darkness? The Darkwing Emperor puffed out his chest upon hearing this. Our tribe has always believed that we are the emissaries of the heavens, and that we are the noblest tribe that enforces justice on behalf of the heavens. However, there was no proof of this belief until one day, when a true heavenly god came to our base and gave us the holy tools, the evil-slaying sword and the black ball, and entrusted us with a mission. Only at that moment did we realize that what we had always believed was true. That's right, the heavenly darkness god came and acknowledged us. You were the one who said that you wanted to be our master, so of course we were ecstatic to accept you. And Lin took a deep breath. Su Xiaolan's eyes also widened in shock. There are people in this world who wanted to be someone else's overlord, and the other party was ecstatic to accept? It sounded very absurd, but when one thought about it carefully, it did make a lot of sense. In the hearts of the Darkwing tribe, only a prodigy could be their master. They were beings that stood above tens of thousands of people, so they naturally had to find someone who was below them first. Everything suddenly became clear. Some of the mysteries were also resolved. Why was the evil-slaying sword so bad *SS? Why did the Darkwing tribe acknowledge him as their master? Why did White Spirit Snake have such a special relationship with him? Why did Bai Ling lose her memories? There was an answer to everything. For some reason, Lin felt a lot more enlightened after learning all of this. He was a little happy, not because his identity had been confirmed, but because the people around him had not betrayed him and were still treating him with sincerity. That was enough, and Lin couldn't help but latch onto little Xie's soft hand with a smile. Who would have thought that our fate would be forged 10,000 years ago? Little Xie looked up at Lin with a guilty expression. You? Don't you hate me? I was the one who poked a hole in the sky. I was the one who hurt you. It's not like it's your fault. The butcher used a knife to butcher a pig. So why would the pig blame the butcher's knife? Lin rubbed little Xie's round, chubby cheeks. Su Xiaolan interjected. Lin, don't call yourself a pig. Lin. Puff. Little Xie burst into laughter. She looked at Lin and didn't slap away Lin's perverted hand. The darkness obscuring the outside world disappeared, and Lin looked at the millions of Darkwing tribe living beings who were still half kneeling on the ground. He cleared his throat and said, I agree. I will officially become your god. All of the Darkwing tribe, living beings, shuddered upon hearing this. All of them trembled with excitement as they yelled at the same time. We welcome the return of our heavenly leader. We pledge our lives to our heavenly leader. We pledge our lives to our heavenly leader. Long live the heavenly Lord, unparalleled battle prowess, immortal divine light. Chapter 2143. From this day forth, all of you are members of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the Blackwing Pavilion. And Lin spoke in a cold voice. Yes, millions of Darkwing tribe powerful beings yelled in unison without any hesitation. Everyone was astonished to the extreme as they looked at the Darkwing tribe powerful beings kneeling on the ground. Goku scratched his head. How many first-rate forces have joined in Lin's side now? Yun Minjing pointed with a finger. The Blood Tribe, the Snow Maidens, the Vermilion Bird Tribe, the most powerful forces on the Divine Source continent. And now the Darkwing tribe. The overall strength of the 4-9 Immortal Sect is truly unfathomable. It's only been a few years, but it's already grown to this extent. Michael sighed with emotion. What's most exciting is that they're not the ones who actively recruit people. Instead, they're the ones who voluntarily come to them. Holy Angel Gabriel sighed with emotion. The force she had nurtured for tens of thousands of years couldn't even compare to a force that had voluntarily joined them. This was the difference between them. Everyone, please rise. We're family from now on, so there's no need for such formalities. And Lin smiled as he spoke to the Darkwing tribe powerful beings. The Darkwing tribe powerful beings were even more excited to hear this. and they were on the verge of tears. The heavenly darkness god had acknowledged them. Not only did he acknowledge them, but he was also treating them as family. Who would dare to look down on them in the future? Thus, the Darkwing tribe joined the defense of Yutong City. The heaven-crushing united army on the Central Front had become even more powerful. They were all sharpening their weapons, waiting for the second earth-shattering battle. In a fresh and elegant manner, Lin held the black ball in one hand and the evil-slaying sword in the other as he carefully studied the secrets hidden within the black ball and the evil-slaying sword. The heavenly darkness god had been plotting ever since the destruction of the Purple Star civilization, and now was the time for him to unleash his trump card. The fact that he had inherited the evil-slaying sword and the black ball was evidence of this. No wonder the Darkwing tribe valued the evil-slaying sword so much and were willing to risk their lives to obtain it. It turned out that they wanted to safeguard this sword for the heavenly darkness god. He had already inherited the evil-slaying sword through fate, yet the Darkwing tribe still wanted to snatch it back and safeguard it for him. Part of the secret had been revealed, but Lin still didn't know what to do next. He had done it himself, but he didn't know how to continue doing it. How could he go about it? The biggest mystery, the secret of the system, was still unsolved. What exactly was the system? What does it have to do with my authority? Did Downlord Luya have some sort of relationship with the Empyrean god of darkness? After the secret was revealed, more questions surfaced, and Lin had no choice but to focus on his research. Little Xie sat silently beside Lin, supporting her chin with one hand, and her dead fish eyes seemed to be in a daze, as if she were thinking about something. However, after a long silence, little Xie suddenly said, Lin, my stomach suddenly feels a little uncomfortable inside the life cabin. All of a sudden, White Spirit Snake slowly regained consciousness on the eastern front of Dawn City. The first thing he saw was Nuwa's concerned expression. Shout by, you suddenly fainted. What happened? Also, how did your cultivation base suddenly rise to the Tao integration pinnacle stage and even touch upon the threshold of the God of Creation stage? Nuwa's voice was very gentle, like a light breeze blowing over a mountain stream. White Spirit Snake clutched her head, and tears began to well up in her eyes. I remember everything, she murmured in a low voice. So that's how it is. No wonder I like Senior and Lin so much and rely on Lin so much. In fact, I'm even willing to accept any of his requests. When Nuwa heard that the innocent Xiao had solved the mystery that puzzled her the most, she couldn't help but ask nervously, why? What did Lin do to you? At the 4-9 Immortal Sect, Bai Ling opened her bleary eyes as she lay sprawled across her research bench. Ow, ow, ow. She rubbed her head, and her eyes became clear in an instant. Countless images surged into her mind, stimulating her brain. I remember now. Bai Ling recalled back to when she was in the Purple Star ruins. While she was waiting for something to happen, an extremely handsome man with a head of long black hair and a pair of deep black eyes suddenly appeared before her, and he immediately plunged his black longsword into her heart. She had thought that she was going to die just like that. However, she suddenly noticed that the man's hand was trembling. The man was struggling, and his expression was twisted with agony and agony. In the end, the man turned and left. Bai Ling managed to survive, but she had lost a portion of her memory. Is that Lin from back then? What kind of gaze is that? No wonder I left the ruins with Lin. So it was him. Bai Ling heaved a faint sigh. The memories that the heavenly Tao shielded in order to protect us have finally been unsealed. What's going to happen next? I really need time. I'm afraid I won't make it in time. Yutong City. And Lin turned to the little girl in the black dress with a nervous expression. Little Xie, tell me where your stomach hurts. Don't scare me. How am I supposed to know where my stomach hurts? It's just my stomach. Little Xie pursed her lips with a bright blush on her cheeks. And Lin seemed to have understood something, and he immediately injected his divine weapon origin energy into Little Xie's body. Little Xie's cheeks were completely flushed, and she only managed to calm down after letting loose a tender moan. Do you feel better now? And Lin asked. Little Xie didn't say anything, but it looked like she was feeling better. And Lin, there's something I have to report to you. Little Xie suddenly said. What is it? And Lin asked. I become more powerful. Little Xie replied in a quiet voice. I became a divine rank pinnacle weapon right after you progressed to the Dao integration stage. And Lin nodded. I know. That's really impressive. You used all of your power to help me escape, and you were able to wound Xianyu on your own. That's not what I want to say. Little Xie pursed her lips. Then what do you want to say? What I want to say is that my evolution has something to do with your divine Dao of darkness. After you successfully progressed to the Dao integration stage, the power of darkness flowed into my body, thereby making me more powerful. I feel like I have a very close and deep connection with you. And Lin felt like something was amiss upon hearing this, but he still replied, You're a dark-type divine tool, which is very compatible with my power. There's indeed a connection between us. Little Xie shook her head. It's not a connection between elements. It's a connection between Dao. I can't explain this in a short time, but I want you to know that I've already reached the pinnacle of the Purple Star civilization, and I've even surpassed that state. After all, I've nurtured a spirit, and I have the support of your power. This means that as long as I have enough power, I can even crush the heavens. Chapter 2144. And Lin was stunned upon hearing this. The evil-slaying sword was indeed a heaven-crushing divine tool, but that didn't mean that it could crush the heavens just because it wanted to, right? One had to realize that the Purple Star race had drawn upon the power of the entire universe to just barely be able to crush the heavens. Now, the evil-slaying sword wanted to crush the heavens on its own? Little Xie, you're not joking, are you? And Lin was astonished. I never joke. Little Xie looked at Lin with a serious expression. Master, I know you. I fought by your side, so I know what you're afraid of. I also want to save you. I'm thinking the same thing as you. Only a heaven-crushing divine tool can save you. Destroy the current heavenly Dao, and you'll be able to transform from a part to a one. You'll be able to transform into the complete heavenly Dao while retaining your unique life force. Little Xie looked at Lin with a serious expression. She still had the ability to mend the heavens, but that would require sacrificing Lin and reverting him back to the unconscious heavenly Dao. This was not a choice that she would consider at all. Little Xie hadn't referred to Lin as master many times, but she viewed Lin as the most important person in her heart, so she always considered Lin as the most important person in her life. Sacrificing Lin to save the world? Sorry, she couldn't do that. Besides, the paramount heavenly god eggs were determined to destroy the human race and all intelligent life forms on the Taichu continent. And Lin sacrificing his life to mend the heavenly Dao would be able to pacify the heavenly Dao and prevent the paramount heavenly gods from unleashing further attacks. Hence, crushing the heavens was the safest course of action. And Lin was clearly a little tempted. I can crush the heavens with you? How should I do that? First of all, your power and my power definitely won't be enough. The Purple Star civilization used the power of the entire Taichu continent and the entire universe to just barely break through the heavenly Dao of darkness. You definitely don't have the material and energy to do so now, so we need to find another way. And Lin's interest was piqued. How so? Little Xie blinked her dead fish eyes with a smile. Destroy the heavenly Dao with the heavenly Dao. And Lin took a deep breath before a thought suddenly occurred to him. Could it be that you want me to follow in the footsteps of the Purple Star civilization? That's right. A smile appeared on Little Xie's face. The Purple Star's heaven-crushing technique actually had a very high probability of success. However, we didn't anticipate that the heavenly Dao would possess a life of its own, which is why it fell short of success. All of this is because the darkness has developed its own consciousness, and that consciousness is directed at Purple Star. But it's different now. Master, you are the darkness. You can choose to devour the other heavenly Daos, and you can do it more thoroughly than when you were unconscious. Use the heavenly Dao to destroy the heavenly Dao, and use the heavenly Dao to create a new heavenly Dao. This is definitely the safest and most effective way to crush the heavens. In that instant, and Lin suddenly understood why Cyril and Chun Chun both felt that he was the most suitable candidate to become the heavenly disciple and the most suitable candidate to crush the heavens. That makes sense, but what should I do? And Lin asked. That's simple. Just devour the rest of the heavenly Tao with your darkness, little Xie replied. And Lin, I don't even know where the rest of the heavenly Tao is, so how am I supposed to devour it? If you're going to devour it, you have to at least tell me how to do it, right? And Lin asked after a long silence. Heavenly gods are actually a part of the heavenly Tao, so you can devour them, little Xie replied. And Lin's mouth gaped open. I don't know how to. A confident smile appeared on little Xie's face. No, you actually do. After a heavenly god dies, the power of Tao should be returned to the heavenly Tao. But do you remember how you obtained your powers of wind and lightning? Well, and Lin was dumbstruck. Wasn't the system the one who helped him absorb them? However, little Xie gave him a completely unexpected answer. That's actually all thanks to your darkness engulfment ability. It could devour all the power of the heavenly Tao for its own use. And Lin's heart jolted with shock, but he still maintained his rationality. No way. If that's the case, then why can't the heavenly earth god and the heavenly yin-yang god that I killed become heavenly gods that I can use? That's because there's another power within your body that filters out all of the heavenly gods that you don't need, leaving behind only the ones that you need to absorb. Little Xie explained. And Lin's eyes widened, and waves of shock surged through his heart. What the F***CK? Why didn't he need them? He really wanted them. Heavenly god powers like time and earth. The more the better. Was this a F***king problem with the system? He had thought that the system was helping him absorb the heavenly gods, and he was very grateful to the system. But it was the system that was hindering him and making him lose all of his other heavenly gods. And Lin felt like he was about to throw up a mouthful of blood. However, that power isn't actually doing anything wrong. Little Xie suddenly said, darkness can engulf other heavenly gods, but when you use the power of the heavenly gods, the other heavenly gods will also resist. In fact, they might even band together to attack you. When that time comes, you'll either fall into a state of confusion, or you might even die on the spot. And Lin was quite elated upon hearing this. The system still loves me. So if you let me absorb the power of the heavenly gods now, wouldn't that happen? And Lin asked, Of course not. You were too weak in the past, so you weren't able to control too many heavenly gods. But it's different now. You have the complete darkness now, so you can absorb even paramount heavenly gods. Little Xie spoke with a smile, and Lin's blood ran cold upon hearing this. Are you sure? Please, be more confident. From the analysis of the Purple Star's top-rate heavenly Tao research data, the power you can theoretically unleash should be able to engulf all of the heavenly Tao aside from yourself. So why wouldn't it be possible for you to engulf a paramount heavenly god? Little Xie pursed her lips. All right, let's just say you're right. And Lin massaged his brows. But here comes the problem. I can't control the filtering power within my body. As you can see, even after I kill the heavenly earth god, I still can't absorb the power of the heavenly earth god. Little Xie puffed out her chest with a smug expression. I can help you. How? And Lin asked, Didn't I tell you? I've become more powerful, so I've attained a new technique. Little Xie snatched the sword from Lin's hand. I attained this technique from the Tao, sword of your 6 strikes of the war god. It's called Vanquish the Heavens and Slay All Evil. Ultimate Tao. And Lin immediately became excited upon hearing this, and he clapped his hands. Bad *SS. This technique sounds really bad *SS just from the name alone. Be serious. Little Xie glanced at Lin before continuing. This technique of mine can unleash your darkness Tao engulfing power to the fullest extent, thereby keeping all external powers at bay and absorbing the Tao wielded by the heavenly gods for your own use. You think I'll be able to keep external powers at bay just because you say so? The power within my body is no ordinary power, and Lin said with a smile. Little Xie choked upon hearing this. If I say it's possible, then it's possible. What if it doesn't work? And Lin was still skeptical. It wasn't that he didn't trust little Xie. It was just that the system was simply far too powerful. Then why don't you try killing a heavenly god? All right, I'll give it a try. Chapter 2145. The two of them immediately came to an agreement, and they decided to use a heavenly god as an experiment. Of course, they would have to do it in the future. Heavenly gods weren't like Dubai's vegetables that could be plucked at will. And Lin had to wait for the next battle to erupt before he would have a chance to try it out. He continued to discuss heaven-crushing theories with little Xie. According to what you're saying, even if I devour all of the remaining heavenly gods, would I be able to crush the heavens? And Lin asked, No, this is only to make you more powerful. Devouring a portion of the heavenly Tao will increase your share of the heavenly Tao, and the darkness you unleash will be even more powerful. You should be aware that even though your divine Tao of darkness is complete, the power of darkness that you can unleash is on a completely different level compared to the backlash of the purple star heaven crushing heavens, right? And Lin nodded like a chicken pecking at rice upon hearing this. Destroying a realm with a single slap, killing hundreds of billions of brethren with a single strike, annihilating countless small worlds, and erasing all traces of the most advanced cultivation civilization. This was something that he couldn't do. This is not to say that your darkness isn't powerful. It's just that the heavenly Tao will always exert this type of suppression on beings that possess self-awareness and powers of the heavenly gods. As long as you are you, this suppression will never weaken. Of course, the destruction of the Purple Star civilization was a special period of time. At that moment, even though the darkness possessed self-awareness, it wasn't suppressed as it was doing something that was beneficial to the heavenly Tao. The reason why we're trying to crush the heavens now is so that you can still rise to power and contend with the true heavenly Tao even when you're being suppressed. Only then will you truly be able to crush the heavens. And Lin's lips twitched slightly. Now that you mention it, I feel like it's going to be even more difficult. Crushing the heavens isn't going to be easy. Little Xie rolled her eyes at Enlin. Not taking into account anything else, our method is at least safer than the heaven-crushing sex method. Of course, this safety is based on the fact that both of us possess extremely powerful abilities. Heaven-defying strength? And Lin was a little unaccustomed to this. Little Xie had been praising him a lot recently, this feeling of confidence. It even gave one the feeling that he was feeling extremely inflated. Suddenly, and Lin felt a little flustered. Little Xie, is it because you know you're a weapon that can pierce through the heavens that you become so full of yourself? And Lin asked. Little Xie nodded in a very natural manner. If I wasn't so full of myself, why would I keep thinking about crushing the heavens? And Lin thought about it, and it seemed to make sense. When you continue to engulf the Tao power of the heavenly gods and push your Tao power of darkness to new heights, you'll be able to challenge the true heavenly Tao. I still remember where the rift in the heavenly Tao is. When the time comes, I'll take you to the heavenly Tao. Little Xie spoke with an extremely serious expression, and Lin was quite touched by little Xie's dedication, and he rubbed his hands over her round cheeks again. Little Xie, you're so adorable when you're advising me like this, phew, and Lin couldn't help but exclaim when he felt the sensation. So tender, so smooth. He could play with his face for 10 years. Whoosh! Little Xie plunged her sword into Lin's waist. Ouch! A pained wail sounded. Idiot, you'd better be more serious. A cold and tender voice sounded. Be gentle, little Xie. It hurts, I know. In any case, our mission now is to find a few heavenly gods to stab. Some of the restrictions in the heavenly Tao had been broken. Some changes were taking place in this world. Within the cabin of life, the paramount goddess of the Spirit Lake tribe, Nuwa, was staring at White Spirit Snake with astonishment etched on her face. I know that Enlin possesses the paramount power of darkness. But you're saying that Enlin is the heavenly darkness god who destroyed the Purple Star civilization. Is that true? You can't just say things like that. White Spirit Snake shook her head with a bitter expression. There's no mistaking it. They look very similar, and their unique auras are completely identical. Your Majesty, You should be well aware of my extreme sensory abilities. Enlin is the heavenly darkness god who destroyed the purple star civilization, or rather, the reincarnation of the heavenly darkness god. Niwa looked up into the blue sky and remained silent for a long time before heaving a forlorn sigh. Even though I heard that Enlin was the heavenly darkness god, I was still hoping that he had obtained the power of the heavenly gods through some special method. Sigh, now that you mention it, I have no choice but to acknowledge his identity. No wonder I felt like he was the best candidate to mend the heavens. So he's the one we're supposed to mend. Your Majesty, what will happen to Senior and Lin if we successfully mend the heavens? White Spirit Snake asked nervously. If Enlin really is a part of the heavenly Tao, then he'll naturally be assimilated by the rest of the heavenly Tao. In other words, his self-awareness and life force will be reduced to nothingness. This is the same fate as all of the other heavenly gods. Niwa's brows furrowed. No, we can't do that. There has to be another way to save Senior and Lin, right? I don't want Senior and Lin to die. Tears welled up in White Spirit Snake's eyes upon hearing Niwa's words, and she tugged on Niwa's sleeve. She wanted to hear a different answer. However, Niwa only gave her a resigned sigh. Little Bai, don't be so emotional at a time like this. And Lin is indeed a good person, but we can't put all of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent at risk for the sake of a good person like him. Perhaps he can still be saved if you want to crush the heavens, but you and I both know that crushing the heavens is extremely risky. Supporting Enlin to crush the heavens is equivalent to pushing all of the living beings into another pit of fire. Niwa spoke in a calm voice, but White Spirit Snake pursed her lips and clenched her fists tightly as she fell into a boundless internal struggle. The figure of that man and his gentle gaze had already been deeply engraved into her life. Niwa's words were still reverberating in her ears. All of the living beings in the world were the most important, and some people could be sacrificed for that. However, wasn't he the one being sacrificed also a part of the world? Black Spirit Snake listened in silence and didn't say anything. However, there was a slightly dazed expression on her face. She thought back to many things in the past. Enlin was very despicable and infuriating, but he wasn't a bad person. On the contrary, he was a very reasonable person. Furthermore, Enlin had truly sacrificed a lot for the Tai Chu continent. He had risked his life on several occasions for the human race, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a superhero of the entire Tai Chu continent. However, for the sake of the entire Tai Chu continent, were they really going to sacrifice a hero who had also fought for the entire Tai Chu continent? The cabin of life fell into a deathly silence. The atmosphere was extremely tense. After a long while, Niwa's voice broke the silence. Let's go and make some preparations. Prepare for what? White Spirit Snake asked blankly. Niwa replied, prepare a plan to deal with Enlin. Chapter 2146. Embrace the Sun. Xianyuan Cheng stood at the summit of the full moon mountain and opened his arms to the rising sun in the distance. The sunlight shone on his incomparably handsome face, illuminating his high-spirited and energetic aura. Big Brother Cheng, you don't have to continue embracing the sun. I've already healed your injuries. Xiao Hong swayed her red head from side to side as she spoke in her sweet voice. Elder Xiao Hong, you're the one who inspired me. Xianyuan Cheng narrowed his eyes as he looked up at the rising sun. I inspired you? Xiao Hong was perplexed. That's right. You've allowed me to experience the light. Embracing the sun every day has allowed me to experience the true essence of light and heat. This has been extremely helpful to my myriad spirit explosion Tao. Xianyuan Cheng smiled. I can feel that my cultivation base is starting to loosen. I'm going to continue to make breakthroughs. Xiao Hong was astonished. You've profited from this disaster. I have to thank Elder Xiao Hong for this. A grateful expression appeared on Xianyuan Cheng's face. Haha, why are you thanking me? You're able to experience the beauty of the sun and embrace the sun. From now on, you're my brother. Xiao Hong chuckled. Xianyuan Cheng and Xiao Hong chatted happily with the sun. By the way, do you feel like the sun is brighter today than yesterday? Xianyuan Cheng asked. That's right. That's the power of light. The heavenly light goddess is undergoing a transformation. Xiao Hong revealed something that astonished countless living beings. Xian Yuan Cheng was completely stunned. After a long while, he immediately contacted Bai Ling via voice transmission talisman to inform her of the heavenly light goddess. Meanwhile, within Yutong City, Lin was studying the black ball. Little Xia, you really don't know what the black ball can do? I don't have any memories regarding the black ball. Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. He knew that the heavenly darkness goddess must have left the evil-slaying sword and the black ball to him for some reason. He already knew what the evil-slaying sword was capable of. It could slice through the heavens and mend the heavens, so it was extremely bad *SS. However, the black ball was an equally important object, so there was no reason that it would only play a short video. However, no matter how Lin fiddled with it, and even used his divine Tao of darkness, he still couldn't figure out what this black ball was. He held the black ball tightly, and a white light flashed in his eyes. Divine inspection technique. Message. This is a smooth and round black ball. Lin, do I need you to tell me this information? He could tell with a single glance. He had no choice but to continue his own research. Ever since the system went on strike, he was at his wits' end regarding his cultivation. All he could do was play with a ball in a corner, hoping to find something important in the ball. That was all he wanted. Su Xiaolan, on the other hand, was very considerate in doing all kinds of supporting work, such as cooking when she had nothing to do, feeding Lin spiritual fruits and immortal fruits, and when she was in the mood, she even gave Lin a massage. Her attributes as a wife were off the charts. Lin was living a wonderful life, until Bai Ling's voice transmission talisman arrived. Lin, I have something to report to the higher-ups of the army. The heavenly light goddess is becoming more and more powerful. Bai Ling went straight to the point. Lin's heart jolted. Are you sure? Xiao Hong's ability to sense light and the purple star's Tao energy have both confirmed that the heavenly light goddess is most likely preparing some kind of powerful technique. Bai Ling spoke with a solemn expression. Women who are forced into a corner are truly terrifying. Lin sighed with emotion. It could be said that the heavenly light goddess didn't even have a single paramount heavenly god as an ally. Yet, she still had to face so many powerful beings of the Tai Chu continent, as well as the other 4 paramount heavenly gods. It was inevitable that she would do something crazy. All right, I understand. I'll be responsible for reporting this to the higher-ups, and Lin said. The higher-ups he was referring to were the Tao integration stage super mighty figures. After all, those who were too weak wouldn't be able to do anything even if they knew about this. Furthermore, it would incite unnecessary panic. All right, how are we going to deal with Chun Chun and Cyril from the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace? Lin asked. They said that they can't do anything about it. They're only responsible for guarding the heaven-crushing Glazed Palace, Bai Ling replied. Lin blinked. TSK. The enemies are out there fighting in the wilderness, while the heaven-crushing sect has become cowards who only care about guarding their home. A new challenge was coming. Although they didn't know what the heavenly light goddess had prepared, it was clear that this was a huge threat to them. You can't say that. Chin Chun and Cyril are indeed inseparable from the heaven-crushing Glazed Palace. 2 gods of creation must guard the heaven-crushing Glazed Palace in order to ensure that the heaven-crushing sect's plan isn't disrupted. Strategically speaking, they're doing the right thing, Bai Ling said. It's just that we who are fighting in the wilderness are suffering. And Lin sighed with emotion. News of the heavenly light goddess becoming more powerful began to spread among the higher-ups of the heaven-crushing United Army. Some mighty figures had even sent out return to void stage suicide squads to investigate the eastern heavenly gate. However, without exception, they were all killed by the heavenly gods guarding that place. Everything that happened at Eastern Heaven Gate was shrouded in a sea of mysterious light. The higher-ups of the Kingdom of the 9 States United Army also understood that unless they launched another large-scale battle, they would have no way of finding out what the heavenly light goddess was doing. However, this was very awkward. If they wanted to disrupt the heavenly light goddess's plan, they would have to break into the Eastern Heavenly Gate. However, With the strength of the kingdom of the 9 States United Army, would they be able to break into the Eastern Heavenly Gate? Obviously not. The reason why they were able to defeat the Heavenly Human Tribe last time was because the heaven-crushing Glazed Palace had sent a paramount being and 4 heavenly gods away. Now, those terrifying beings were all at the Eastern Heavenly Gate, and Chun and Cyril wouldn't come out. How could the kingdom of the 9 States allied forces fight them? It was useless to hit him with his head. So something awkward happened. Even though they knew that the heavenly light goddess was slowly becoming more powerful, they could only watch on helplessly. They didn't dare to take the initiative to disrupt her transformation. Inside the heaven-breaking glazed palace, the sharp energy pillar pierced through the clouds. In the spotless main hall, Chun sat cross-legged in the center of the whirlpool. There was a worried expression on his face as he gazed at the sky beyond the transparent dome. What are you worried about? A clear and ethereal voice traveled over. Shui Yan, who was dressed in a white and blue dress, slowly drifted toward the frail youth. Her expression was gentle as she asked this question. I'm worried about Lin. Chun didn't hide anything from Shui Yan. Shui Yan faltered slightly. He's already become the heavenly darkness god, and he's much more powerful than before. What are you still worried about? Chun shook his head. The more powerful he is, the more hatred he attracts. I'm not even sure if the paramount heavenly gods will throw all of their trump cards at Enlin. Shui Yan's expression shifted slightly. Enlin is already this much of a threat to the heavens? More so than you can imagine, Chun replied. Shui Yan pondered for a moment. But this is a good thing for the heaven-crushing sect. Now that our enemies are paying attention to Enlin, won't our heaven-crushing sect be even more successful? What's the original purpose of our heaven-crushing sect? Chun asked. To not be oppressed by the heavenly Tao, Shui Yan replied without hesitation. That's right. As long as the heavenly Tao is destroyed, that's all that matters. As for which heavenly disciple is destroying the heavenly Tao, that's not important. So why should we, the heavenly disciples with low success rates, be happy that our enemies are targeting a heavenly disciple with an extremely high success rate? Chun asked. Shui Yan was stunned. This, Chapter 2147. Let's hurry up and kill the heavenly light goddess. This is a rare opportunity. The heavenly sea god said excitedly to the heavenly life goddess and the heavenly heaven god through the heavenly sea mirror. Ocean, don't forget that our primary target is Enlin, the heavenly heaven god said in an indifferent voice. But this is when light is at her weakest, and this is our best opportunity to defeat her. If we allow her to continue to develop, she might become even more powerful than us. The heavenly sea god urged. No matter how strong she is she stronger than our 3-phase true heaven reincarnation formation? The heavenly heaven god didn't think much of this. Besides, even though the goddess of light has some conflict with us, she still wants to take care of the heaven-crushing sect and Enlin the most. How can we miss out on this opportunity? The life goddess continued with a smile. Only when she attracts the other top forces will she create an opportunity for us to snipe Enlin. The heavenly sea god was quite disappointed. Idiot, you have no idea what the goddess of light will become once she successfully transforms. She will definitely find a chance to deal with us. Believe me, kill the goddess of light now, or we will be in a very dangerous situation. The heavenly sea god was trying his best to instigate them, but the 2 paramount heavenly gods were completely unmoved. Days passed by. The sun in the sky was getting brighter and brighter. Enlin's research on the Black Sphere was still fruitless. During this time, Lan Xiaoni sent a voice transmission talisman to inform him that the West Sea United Army seemed to have snuck away from their base and had taken a long detour toward the White Nectar Sea. She had initially planned to give chase, but she decided against it after sensing a paramount aura. There was a paramount heavenly god among the enemy's ranks, so she didn't dare to act rashly. Upon hearing this, Enlin knew that the heavenly sea god had to have fled to the Sea of Life. In any case, they had already fallen out with each other. If Ocean still respected the heavenly light goddess's intelligence, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to reconcile with the heavenly light goddess. They were already enemies. And Lin felt like the most important thing to ponder was what his current relationship with the heavenly sea god was like. Do we still want to be brothers? They had not shed all pretense of cordiality yet. However, Lin knew that the heavenly sea god wasn't truly helping him during that battle. While the heavenly sea god was tricking the heavenly earth god, he was also trying to trick him into revealing all of his trump cards. It was clear that the heavenly sea god had succeeded, and Lin had lost a fifth of his HP. However, the heavenly sea god was also scared after seeing Lin's trump card. After the battle concluded, he immediately ran to meet up with the other two paramount beings without any hesitation. The heavenly sea god had stabbed his sworn brother in the back, so Lin naturally couldn't take advantage of him. As such, he immediately yelled at Lan Xiaoni to retaliate against his sworn brother. However, who would have thought that Lan Xiaoni would be so ruthless? While Lin was shocked, he couldn't help but feel refreshed. Up until now, it could be said that the two brothers had fought each other to a draw. Should they continue to be brothers? That was the question. Should he contact the heavenly sea god? And Lin silently picked up the Heart of the Ocean clone that his brother had given him. This thing could only be used for one-way communication. The heavenly sea god could contact him, but he couldn't contact the heavenly sea god. However, he now possessed the complete paramount power of darkness, so he could see through the principles behind this thing. As such, he could completely reverse communicate with the heavenly sea god. The only problem was that he was contacting the heavenly sea god now. If the heavenly sea god and the heavenly sky god were with the heavenly sea god, then the heavenly sea god really wouldn't be able to defend himself. Wait, why am I even more excited now? Lin was suddenly itching for action. Just as he decided to give his sworn brother a surprise, his system suddenly lit up. Holy F***CK. Lin's entire body was filled with excitement. What heavenly sea god? What surprise? All of that was thrown to the back of his mind. All he wanted was his sworn brother. My dear system, you finally responded. Have you decided to tell me how to progress to the Tao integration intermediate stage? And Lin eagerly opened his system as he spoke with elation. He then faltered upon seeing the system. Detected that host's current reputation is too high, hereby assigning the following special mission to reduce the host's reputation. Special mission. Make 1 million living beings who have a favorable impression of you detest you within 3 days. Mission reward. 1 chance at the God of War fantasy wheel. Punishment for mission failure. Make host experience the pain of dystocia 666 times. Note, this mission cannot be declined. This, and Lin's entire body stiffened upon seeing the contents of the mission. His smile froze on his face, as if he had been struck by lightning. What the F***CK was this mission? Was this a suicide mission? Either be detested by 1 million living beings, or experience the pain of dystocia 666 times. Was the system issuing this mission a demon? 10,000 curses stampeded across in Lin's mind. His elation at finally receiving a response from the system had completely vanished. He had finally gotten a sense of existence, but it was just a suicide mission? Was he, and Lin, someone who would destroy his own image in order to complete a mission? However, that War God Fantasy Wheel of Fortune did look quite tempting. Should he try it? And Lin had tried the lottery before, but he had never tried the God of War Fantasy Wheel. What if there was something good hidden in it? He couldn't miss it. Besides, who knew how painful the pain of dystocia would be? It would probably be more painful than normal childbirth, right? If he failed, he would have to experience this pain 666 times. Even if he was a man of steel and wasn't afraid of pain, his pride as a man didn't want to experience dystocia so many times. So be it. For the survival of the human race, for the survival of all living beings on the Tai Chu continent. What harm is there in me humiliating myself just once? And Lin puffed out his chest and made up his mind. Make 1 million fans detest him. Simple. A fan would turn into an enemy in the blink of an eye. And Lin immediately issued a decree and gathered all 6 million Darkwing tribe cultivators at a large Dao plaza. The heavenly leader has issued a decree. All Darkwing tribe cultivators are to gather at the Divine Moon Dao Plaza. The Day-Night true monarch announced this news with excitement. The Darkwing tribe cultivators cheered with excitement upon hearing this. They all flapped their wings and flew toward the Divine Moon Dojo without any hesitation. Every second counted as they flew toward the Divine Moon Dojo, afraid that they would be a second late. This was the first time the heavenly leader had summoned them, and they were all extremely excited. Their faces were filled with anticipation and bliss. And Lin stood on a tall platform and looked at the countless Darkwing tribe cultivators before him. A smile appeared on his face as he looked at the expressions on their faces. It was quite clear that all of these Darkwing tribe cultivators revered him. They were definitely his fans. That was right. Making 1/6 of the Darkwing tribe cultivators detest him was a piece of cake. Chapter 2148. And Lin felt like it was not a difficult task to make 1 million fans hate him. For some reason, he found all of the Darkwing tribe living beings to be a little adorable. Sorry, brothers, for the sake of the Tai-Chu continent and the human race, I have to hurt you. And Lin took a deep breath. Do you know why I called all of you here? I don't know. No matter what the Heavenly Lord tells us to do, we will do anything for you. That's right. Even if I have to tread on fire and die 1,000 deaths, I will not hesitate. All of the Darkwing tribe living beings began to yell in unison. And Lin looked at these fanatical fans and thought back to when he had faced the Blood tribe. They were also just as fanatical and passionate. The Darkwing tribe living beings were quite adorable like this. He really couldn't bear to hurt them like this. The reason why I called you over is actually to explain something to you. And Lin clasped his hands behind his back as a disdainful expression appeared on his face. And Lin continued upon seeing the curious and nervous expressions on the faces of the Darkwing tribe living beings. To be honest, I am actually quite regretful that I accepted all of you. All of the Darkwing tribe living beings' expressions shifted, and some of their faces even paled. And Lin's lips curled up as he looked down at the Darkwing tribe living beings. I'm not trying to target anyone, but I just want to say that all of you are trash. You don't deserve to stand here. You are weak and cowardly, and you don't deserve to follow me. That's right, I don't need you at all, and I look down on you. His arrogant and disdainful words instantly sent shockwaves rippling through the entire Dao Plaza. Boom! The entire Dao Plaza erupted into commotion. Countless Darkwing tribe living beings were in an uproar, and Lin was ecstatic to see all of the excited Darkwing tribe living beings. This was the right reaction. What was the most taboo for an idol? Of course, it was to insult their fans. Fans had their own dignity. If an idol didn't even respect his fans, wouldn't his fans leave him at any moment? Or even turn from fan to hater? And Lin's actions had not only displayed his arrogance, but he had also insulted the Darkwing tribe living beings. How could they not be disgusted by his actions? Come on, all of you hate me. Out of 6 million Darkwing tribe cultivators, it should be easy for 1 million to hate him, right? And Lin excitedly looked at his system to check the progress of the special mission. However, when he looked over, he was dumbfounded. Mission progress. 0. 1%, what? It was only 0. 1%. I put in so much effort to perform, abandoned the burden of being an idol, worked hard to discredit myself, worked hard to discredit my fans. But in the end, almost no fans hated me. While Lin was still in a daze, the Darkwing tribe cultivators on the Dao Plaza were already howling in pain. Woo-woo. I didn't think that I would be so unbearable in the eyes of the God Lord. I don't want to live anymore. His Excellency has gone too far with his words. I hate him. Idiot. What His Excellency said is the truth. Aren't you weak? Aren't you afraid? You've got nothing to say, right? We are weak and cowardly, so His Excellency didn't say anything wrong. Tell me, why do you hate him? One of the Darkwing tribe cultivators, who had clearly been filled with hatred, was instantly rendered speechless by his comrade, and he immediately lowered his head in shame as tears of helplessness flowed down his face. Similar scenes were taking place elsewhere on the Dow Plaza, and Lin watched as the mission progress slid from 1% to 0, 9%, 0, 8%, 0, 7%. He felt like he was in Sparta. Whoa, we are so weak. We are indeed not worthy of following His Excellency. Perhaps we really won't be of much help in battle. One of the Darkwing monarchs suddenly said, "Have you guys realized that His Excellency didn't say these things on the day he asked us to follow him? Instead, he chose to say these things today?" Another Darkwing monarch came to a sudden realization. Could it be that he feels that the enemy is too powerful and that we will die if we participate in battle, so he doesn't want us to take the risk? That's right. That's why he emphasized that he doesn't need us. He's actually afraid that we will die fighting for him. Think about it. Even though we're weak in this battle against the Celestial Tribe, every bit of power we have is a bit of power. There's no need for him to say something like that to force us to leave. But he did say that he was thinking about our lives. Whoa, His Excellency is the best. One of the Darkwing monarchs had tears streaming down his face. He would rather damage his own image than allow us to be harmed. I will definitely follow a master like this until the day I die. He said we are weak and cowardly. But isn't that the weakness of the Darkwing tribe? He's using a different method to point out our weaknesses. He's really putting a lot of thought into this. That's enough. His Excellency is the only master of the Blade Knight Monarch. I will definitely become more powerful in the future, and I will never cower in fear. I will follow His Excellency with my life. I will follow His Excellency with my life. Soon, their voices reverberated throughout the entire Dow Plaza, and Lin stared blankly at the emotional Darkwing tribe members before him. He clasped a hand over his heart as he watched the mission progress regress to 0%. Holy F***CK. Have these Darkwing tribe members gone insane? I was clearly scolding people. I was scolding all of you. All of you looked so moved and even raised your fighting spirit. What was going on? Of course, and Lin had also heard the Darkwing tribe cultivators' discussion. It could be said that they had completely misinterpreted his words and completely misunderstood his intentions. It turned out that when fans were crazy to a certain extent, even their idols cursing them could be interpreted as their idols loving them. And Lin was very unwilling to accept this. Don't think too much into it, and don't read too much into it. I really do look down on you. You are all trash, cowardly and weak trash. These words were like a devastating blow to the average fan. Hurry up and hate me. Please, I beg of you, hurry up and hate me. And Lin was almost begging them in his heart. However, the Darkwing tribe members were not angry at all. Instead, they were even more moved as they nodded incessantly. Some of them even began to cry out loud. That's right, His Excellency, we are trash. Your disdain will forever be my motivation. A Darkwing tribe beauty covered her face in embarrassment. I'm a cute little piece of trash. Only His Excellency can classify me. And Lin, insane. These Darkwing tribe members must have gone insane. They must have been struck by the system's AI-lowering halo. And Lin felt like his vision was about to darken. F***CK. What was he supposed to do? The gathering at the Dow Plaza came to an end just like that. It couldn't be said that the Darkwing tribe members' recognition and loyalty toward Lin had increased to a whole new level. All of them were extremely moved, and they all began to cultivate diligently, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Knowing shame and then bravely, this was probably what it meant to be in such a state. It was very inspiring, and Lin left in a daze. He couldn't beat them, and scolding them was useless. If he praised them, they would fly into the sky. What should he do? He had underestimated the image of himself in the hearts of others. He was like an invincible golden statue. Only now did he feel the system's deep malice. The system definitely would not give him free marks. This mission was extremely difficult. Chapter 2149. And Lin was feeling very dejected at this moment. His image in everyone's hearts was so good and flawless. This should have been something to be happy about. But he couldn't bring himself to be happy now. The 666 dystocia experience had him panicking beyond belief. I can't give up just like this. I have to pull myself together. Lin took a deep breath and began to think about how to ruin his image. Generally speaking, there were several ways to ruin someone. The first was to expose one's flaws. But I'm so perfect, so what flaws do I have? The second was to expose one's dark history, such as doing something disgusting, unspeakable, or even something infuriating. It would be best if it was something that involved morality. And Lin thought about it carefully. He had always been a despicable person, but there was always a bottom line in his heart that he would never do anything that violated his bottom line. He thought back to his past and realized that he really hadn't done anything bad ever since he was weak and powerful. Was he going to ruin his image? Make up some dark history? That would definitely result in a crushing defeat. Just think about what had happened to the Dow Plaza today. Hence, making up a dark history was very difficult. The third was to offend his fans. That wasn't necessary. The fourth was to take a wrong stand in the face of a major issue. And Lin had been revered as the hero of the Tai Chu continent, and he was the main force in the war against the heavenly human tribe. He had countless worshippers, and his determination to resist the heavenly human tribe had not wavered. He couldn't announce to the world that he was going to join the heavenly human tribe, right? If he did that, the other powerful beings would most likely think that his mind had been controlled by the heavenly gods. Perhaps that would cause a massive commotion. Sigh, I'm in such a difficult situation. Lin sighed. Lin, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so sad? At this moment, a clear and melodious voice suddenly entered his ears. Lin turned around to find a beautiful woman in a jade dress standing beside him with a concerned expression on her face. Xiaolan. Lin looked at Su Xiaolan, and he was just about to voice out his grievances when a thought suddenly exploded in his mind, as if a brilliant idea had occurred to him. Su Xiaolan, I need you to cooperate with me. And Lin spoke in an excited voice. Above you, Tong Divine City. Suddenly, countless thunderbolts roared. Streaks of blue lightning streaked across the cloudy sky, lighting up the entire city. They were like terrifying lightning dragons that were swimming in the sky, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. And Lin, you heartless man, I'm going to kill you. The woman's angry and aggrieved voice resounded through the entire sky. One by one, the living beings walked out of their rooms and looked toward the sky. Huh? Isn't that the divine Phoenix Maiden? What's wrong with her? She seems very angry. Sigh, haven't you heard? She said Lin is a heartless man. Hiss, could it be? Everyone's curiosity and gossipy hearts were aroused at this moment. This was an earth-shattering event that could shake the entire continent. They loved to gossip about such things. The Lightwing clan, the True Demon clan, and even a monks from the Buddhist kingdom of the West all looked up into the sky at the beautiful lady. Who was it that had the guts to try and steal the divine Phoenix Maiden's man? Wait, that wasn't the point. The point was that Lin had cheated on her. Everyone came to a sudden realization, and they felt even more excited. At this moment, Lin had already appeared from within the dark clouds, and he looked at Su Xiaolan with a panicked expression. Su Xiaolan, I've been wrongly accused. There really is nothing going on between us. This is all a misunderstanding. Let me explain. Tui, scumbag, some of the Light Wing clan women were already spitting on the ground. That sounds so familiar. Is this the language of scumbags? The number of detestable people began to increase explosively, and it instantly broke through the 10,000 mark. That was 1%, and Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing this. As expected, a perfect man like him could only be ruined by cheating. That's right, no matter how perfect he would still be condemned by everyone if he cheated on his wife. That was an indication of disloyalty and betrayal. Seeing Su Xiaolan being cheated on, all of the living beings were bound to unite against a common enemy. This was especially evident among the female population. No matter who he was, no matter what the reason was, they were going to call him a scumbag first. And Lin was initially quite elated. However, upon seeing that the mission progress bar in the system had skyrocketed to 10%, he started to panic again. At this moment, some people in Yutong City were already discussing among themselves. And Lin cheated on her? That's impossible. They were so lovey-dovey in the past. Besides, is there any woman in this world who can compare with the Divine Phoenix Maiden? The Divine Phoenix Maiden's beauty transcends beyond that of any other species, and her powers are at the God of Creation stage. She's a supreme-grade female immortal that no one would even dare to dream of. Why would Lin fall in love with another woman? You're right. There must be some misunderstanding. Let's hear in Lin's explanation before making a judgment. Most of the spectators in Yutong City were more rational in the end, and Lin discovered that his mission progress was regressing. F***CK. No, he couldn't continue like this. He had to get more information. All right, I'll listen to your explanation. Su Xiaolan pointed her dragon sparrow sword at Lin's neck with a cold expression. Tell me, what's going on between you and Her Majesty Nuwa? And Lin was dumbstruck upon hearing this. What the F***CK? Even Nuwa was dragged into this. This wave was too fierce, wasn't it? He had initially thought that he would be able to get some information out of the way, but Su Xiaolan had already made the first move. This attack was extremely ferocious, and Yutong City instantly erupted into a frenzy. My God, the mistress is Nuwa. That's right. If there's anyone in this world who can compete with the Divine Phoenix Maiden, then it has to be the paramount goddess of the demon tribe, Nuwa. My God, doesn't that mean that there's a very high chance that Lin has cheated on her? After all, he didn't even bother to mention Nuwa's name. Tui, scumbag. The male cultivators stomped their feet in frustration while the female cultivators were enraged. Instantly, the number of people who hated Lin skyrocketed. The number of people who hated Lin immediately broke through the 300,000 mark. It was already 30%, so he had to work harder. Even though Lin was quite panicked that Nuwa had been dragged into this, he had no choice but to continue the act. He could already see hope in completing his mission. There's nothing going on between me and Nuwa. We only hugged each other like friends, and Lin explained. Everyone erupted into another commotion. They hugged each other. The mission progress had reached 50%. Tears welled up in Su Xiaolan's eyes. Nonsense. I saw you kissing her with my own eyes that day. Is this something a friend should do? And Lin was dumbstruck. Was this plot really that exciting? Xiaolan, don't go overboard. Xiaolan, I might have kissed her, but the person I truly love is you. And Lin replied with a grief-stricken expression. Boom. Everyone erupted into an uproar upon hearing this. And Lin's mission progress had instantly reached 100%. Chapter 2150. And Lin was on the verge of tears of joy. He had finally succeeded. It really wasn't easy. Everything he had done seemed to be worth it at this moment. And Lin was just about to explain everything when he suddenly saw the dragon's sparrow sword slash down upon his face, almost blinding him with its dazzling light. Scumbag, eat this. The vermilion bird, origin energy imbued within the sword projection, whistled through the air. All living beings within a radius of over 500 kilometers were struck by a bone-chilling, killing intent. It was extremely terrifying, and Lin didn't even have a chance to react before the dragon sparrow sword struck his chest. Rip! The blade of the sword sliced a massive gash into his body. Boundless sword intent bore down on his body as he flew through the air. Oh, it hurts! And Lin let loose a blood-curdling cry. Stop, Xiaolan. Our mini-plot has already come to an end. The mini-plot had come to an end. This was a code word that only they knew. It meant to end the performance. After that, he could explain to everyone that this was just a small performance by him and Xiaolan. That way, he would be able to reverse the image that had been shattered. This wave of operations could be said to be a successful plan. And Lin was extremely aggrieved that he had been struck by the sword projection because he had yelled too slowly. Now that he had taken the initiative to stop, he could finally heave a sigh of relief. He then saw another sword projection drawing closer and closer to him. Scumbag! The dragon sparrow sword descended upon Lin's astonished eyes. The sword projection extended for over 500 kilometers, tearing through the entire heavens. A massive gash appeared on Enlin's chest, and he let loose a blood-curdling wail as he was blasted flying for countless kilometers, unable to stop himself. Everyone on the ground couldn't help but shiver when they saw this scene. They're fighting? What terrifying domestic violence. Tui, this isn't domestic violence. This is what happens to scumbags. That sword projection could probably severely wound a heavenly god. This is the first time I've seen such explosive domestic violence. All of the onlookers were astonished. Compared to the other living beings, Enlin was the most shocked one. Didn't he say it was over? Why hasn't Xiaolan stopped? Xiaolan, quick! The performance is over. Enlin thought Xiaolan didn't hear him, so he yelled again. No, the show isn't over. Su Xiaolan raised her sword and slashed. Enlin. Just like that, countless shocking sword chis began to surge in the sky, as well as the man's miserable cries and the cheers of countless people in the city. The next day, the domestic violence in Yutong Divine City came to an end. Afterward, Su Xiaolan and the bandaged Enlin explained to the Yutong Divine City's heaven-crushing army that this was a short video of an affair. They were using this as a warning to those who were unfaithful to their partner that they would be hacked to death and cursed by countless people. In the end, raucous applause erupted in Yutong Divine City. The heaven-crushing army expressed that this was an extremely entertaining performance, and they had all benefited immensely from it. They were also looking forward to Su Xiaolan and Enlin's next performance. In a courtyard filled with birds and fragrant flowers, a man with bandages on his body looked up at the sky with a gloomy expression. This man was Enlin. He didn't dare to ask why Su Xiaolan had attacked him with her sword and why she had attacked him in such a manner. Afterward, Su Xiaolan's only explanation was that she was too immersed in her character and couldn't extricate herself from it. Anyone with even the slightest bit of emotional intelligence would know that this was a lie. Su Xiaolan had indeed wanted to attack him. Now, he finally figured out the reason behind this. That's right. Even if it was for the sake of completing the mission, any girl would be unhappy if Su Xiaolan had been cheated on in front of so many people. Enlin's heart was filled with bitterness. He had come to this realization far too late. He had thought that he had found a way out of this predicament and was ecstatic like a little kid. Who would have thought that he had dug another hole for himself? This was the beginning of another tragedy. It was all the system's fault for issuing this stupid mission. Enlin gritted his teeth at the thought of the system. Even though he was angry, he still had to accept the reward. Enlin removed the bandages on his body and turned his gaze toward a large shiny wheel in his system. This was the God of War Dream Wheel. He had the privilege of drawing the prize once, and he was extremely excited. This wheel was enshrouded in a dazzling, dreamy light, concealing the prize within. It was extremely beautiful, and just from its appearance alone, it was several times more impressive than the previous wheels. As expected of the God of War Dream Wheel, it was very famous, and its appearance was even more so. The prize within should be very good, right? If he could obtain a dream-grade weapon, it would be very helpful in future battles. Hence, he had high hopes for this lucky draw. With excitement in his heart, Enlin began to spin the wheel in his mind. The wheel spun rapidly, and Enlin's emotions spun along with it. Although he couldn't see what the prize within the wheel was, nor could he see what the needle was pointing at, he was still very nervous and excited. Finally, the wheel slowly came to a stop. A voice as sweet as the sounds of nature rang out. Congratulations, host. You have successfully drawn a dream-grade gift. Dream Bubble Stick. A multicolored light flashed. An item suddenly appeared in Enlin's palm. It was a large bottle that glowed with a faint golden light. There was a dream-colored liquid rippling inside, and a guitar-like bubble stick was inserted into the mouth of the bottle. There were 2 circles at the end of the bubble stick. Dream Bubble Stick? Enlin's mind went blank at this moment. He felt as if he had misheard something. Enlin unleashed his divine sense without any hesitation, only to discover that there really wasn't any powerful energy stirring it. He didn't give up. He pulled out the bubble stick from the mouth of the bottle, took a deep breath, and blew at the 2 transparent holes. Instantly, Countless bubbles rippling with colorful light began to fly out from the two small circles. They danced in the air, glowing with an extremely dazzling brilliance under the sunlight, and they even refracted bursts of dreamlike fluorescence. This was a very beautiful, very dreamlike scene. And Lin was momentarily stunned, and tears even began to flow from his eyes. So this is what the dream wheel of fortune draws. It really is so dreamlike, but what do I need this thing for? And Lin's hand was trembling slightly as he held the bubble stick. He poked at the colorful bubble with a finger, and the bubble burst as soon as it was poked. It even turned into colorful streams of light and bloomed like fireworks. It looked very dreamy. The beautiful bubbles only lasted for a moment. He ruined his own image and was beaten up by Xiaolan. But all he got in return was this. No matter how good he was at blowing bubbles, he was still just blowing bubbles. And Lin felt as if his heart had burst like the bubbles in front of him. Trash system. Ruined my life. Chapter 2151. And Lin blew bubbles with a gloomy expression. No matter how dreamy and beautiful the bubbles were, they couldn't dispel his melancholy and F***ed-up mood. After working so hard for so long, he only obtained something like this. No one would be happy. He was still spitting bubbles. He wanted to see if these bubbles had any other special functions and if there were any other special effects hidden within them. However, experiments after experiments proved that this was just a F***king ordinary bubble-blowing thing. It was a useless thing. So beautiful. A voice suddenly sounded. Su Xiaolan had appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. She stood still and stared blankly at the floating bubbles in the courtyard. As the bubbles fluttered in the air, they perfectly blended in with the surrounding environment, releasing an ever-changing colorful brilliance. It looked exceptionally dreamy and beautiful, and Lin saw the amazement and love in Su Xiaolan's eyes. It was as if she was a little girl who had never seen the world and suddenly saw a particularly beautiful scene. She couldn't help but be surprised and amazed. Xiaolan with this expression was especially cute. For the first time, and Lin felt that this dreamy bubble stick wasn't so useless. With this thought in mind, he silently made a decision in his heart. Perhaps this thing could be used for that matter. And Lin, this is all you're doing? Su Xiaolan looked at the bubbles and asked. Her beautiful and enchanting eyes reflected countless colorful bubbles, making her look somewhat dreamy. Yes, this is my gift to you. Do you like it? And Lin said with a smile and blew bubbles at Su Xiaolan. A bunch of small bubbles flew towards Su Xiaolan. Don't think that I will forgive you just because you did these things. Su Xiaolan slapped the dreamy bubbles that flew toward her. The corners of her mouth curled up inadvertently, betraying her current mood. At the end of the day, she was still a young girl over 100 years old. She couldn't resist some dreamy and beautiful things. Why do some girls like shiny things? It's all because it's pretty. Actually, there was no need for so many practical things. Beautiful, romantic, and that would be it. The corners of Su Xiaolan's mouth curled up, and she was utterly unable to conceal the smile on her face. As she flicked her sleeves, it was as if a green lotus had bloomed, and countless multicolored bubbles moved along with her, causing her to glisten with divine light and give birth to a magnificent aura. It was like a peerlessly beautiful painting, and Lin was stunned for a moment. This was the most dreamy scene in the world. He hurriedly continued to blow bubbles, and Su Xiaolan was very cooperative. Her sleeves danced lightly, and her incomparably graceful figure was like a graceful butterfly dancing among the dreamy bubbles. Countless bubbles revolved around her like beautiful fairies, and it was very harmonious and perfect. And Lin felt that he could remember this scene for the rest of his life. Praise the system. He had wronged the system. This thing was indeed a hidden divine artifact. That's right, the Dream Bubble Stick was a top-notch tool for picking up girls. As Lin thought of this, an infatuated smile appeared on his face. Outside Yutong City, in Zai City, this was the center of the central battlefield. Most of the war resources were transported to Yutong Divine City through the spatial gate, so the living beings in the city were very busy. Everyone was a diligent porter. A woman in a black robe stood silently at the center of the city. She was just about to do something when she saw a piece of shocking news. She held a newspaper in her hand, and her body trembled uncontrollably. There was a headline on the newspaper: "Shocking. The truth behind the Divine Phoenix maiden-beating sect leader in Lin and Yuhua was the third party." This was an earth-shattering turn of events. The woman almost charged over and tore Lin to shreds upon seeing this headline. She was Yuhua. What had happened between her and Lin? She became even more enraged after reading the headline. No one had ever dared to say something like this about her. Hug. Kiss. Do Lin and Su Xiaolan want to die? Even though it was clarified in the end that this was just a small theater and that everything was fake, she was still enraged. No one had ever dared to make fun of her like this in her entire life. Oomph. Who would have thought? I didn't provoke you, but you came to provoke me first. Yuhua gritted her teeth tightly while her eyes that were usually extremely gentle were suffused with a wisp of a cold light at this moment. So be it. What you've done has made my mind even more resolute. Yuhua raised her head to look at the gargantuan spatial gate. There were countless resources being transported in and out of it, and a cold smile appeared on her face. Days passed by one after another. After a massive battle, the two sides were locked in a stalemate. The Heavenly Human Tribe Army on the Western Front was no longer secret. The powerful beings of the West Sea Alliance also joined the heaven-crushing United Army on the Central Front under the direct leadership of Lin. Lan Xiaoni was ecstatic to see Big Boss and Lin again. She wore a blissful expression on her face every day, and she would occasionally offer delicious seafood to Big Boss as a tribute. At the same time, she was also very nervous around Su Xiaolan. Even though she was a powerful heavenly god and was already a lofty living being in the West Sea, she was still very nervous for some reason. Underling Lan, it's very inconvenient for your West Sea Alliance army to fight on land, so I'll give you a sea transformation divine tool that will allow you to transform a large area into seawater, and Lin said. Big Boss and Lin is the best. Lan Xiaoni nodded with a dainty smile. She was already prepared for this. She could transform a large area into a sea by herself, but she didn't say that out loud. She only wanted to praise her Big Boss. By the way, Demon Lord Ling Gu has been insisting on following me. He even said that he already possesses combat prowess comparable to that of a heavenly god. Is that true? Lin asked. It's true. Lan Xiaoni recalled the image of Lin pummeling a heavenly god. Lin nodded upon hearing this. Then I agree to let him join the Gods of Destruction team. You have no objections, right? Of course not. Lan Xiaoni agreed to all of Lin's requests. By the way, Big Boss and Lin, can you recruit me into the Gods of Destruction team as well? Lan Xiaoni turned to Lin with a beseeching expression. No, the West Sea Alliance army can't go without their leader. Lin immediately turned her down. The Gods of Destruction team was a secret team that he had established, and they were about to carry out the most dangerous plan of all. Lan Xiaoni was the pillar of the West Sea Alliance, so she couldn't disappear from the team. Chapter 2152. Lan Xiaoni was still unwilling to give up. But isn't the Divine Phoenix Maiden supposed to guard Yutong City as well? Why can she join the Gods of Destruction team? And Lin blinked in confusion. He didn't know what to say. All right. After a short while, Lin couldn't find any reason to refute this, so he reluctantly agreed. However, you've joined the team now, so your current mission is to lead the West Sea Alliance in defending Yutong City. Haha, don't worry, Big Boss and Lin, leave it to me. Lan Xiaoni patted her voluptuous chest with a smug expression. Even though they couldn't do anything together, joining this team gave her a greater sense of participation and allowed her to get closer to Big Boss and Lin. This was why she was so happy. The Gods of Destruction team would be led by Lin, with Su Xiaolan as the vice leader. The other members would be Yun Minjing, the Battling Buddha, Michael, Demon Emperor Siyu, Demon Lord Ling Gu, and Lan Xiaoni. The objective of forming this small team was to slay a paramount heavenly god in a situation where they least expected it to happen. The situation was currently at a stalemate. Everyone was biding their time. However, In terms of power alone, the two sides were evenly matched. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had managed to turn the tables on the heaven-crushing United Army into a stalemate. This was nothing short of a miracle. However, even though the heaven-crushing United Army was in a stalemate, the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army didn't dare to make any rash moves. Because in a battle of this level, any mistake could lead to a reversal of advantage and disadvantage, or even lead to a complete loss. All of the paramount heavenly gods knew that the heaven-crushing United Army didn't dare to take the initiative. They could only rely on the heaven-punishing formation in Yutong City to unleash their full power. However, it was exactly under these circumstances that the heavenly gods thought that the heaven-crushing United Army wouldn't take the initiative to attack. Of course, there was an even more important reason. The heavenly sea god had not contacted Enlin for a long time, and he had secretly contacted Enlin to inform him of a piece of information. The heavenly light god was at her weakest when she was undergoing a transformation, and it was the easiest time to take advantage of her weakness. Furthermore, during this transformation, she couldn't use her doubt true form in any battle. Otherwise, she would immediately die from the backlash. In other words, it would be the easiest to ambush the heavenly light goddess at this time. And Lin thought it made sense. He immediately formed the Gods of Destruction team and decided to behead the Goddess of Life. You heard right, and Lin is going to kill the paramount heavenly life god, the heavenly god who had forced him to sacrifice his life behind the scenes. Of course, he wasn't doing this for revenge, but for a reason. Night fell. Today, dark clouds covered the sky, and the moon and stars gradually covered the sky. The land was shrouded in darkness, and only Yutong City was brightly lit. It was like a bright pearl in the darkness, a bustling city that never sleeps. A few figures began to slowly move toward the white nectar sea through the darkness. Sect leader Enlin, is it really okay for us to just charge over like this? Michael asked in a slightly panicked voice. The battling Buddha sneered. You're the most powerful being in the Lightwing clan. Aren't you embarrassed to be so cowardly? We can't go wrong by following Big Brother and arrangements. Is he going to screw us over? Goku's trust in Enlin was the highest among all of them. This was his personality. He would place unconditional trust in those he approved of. There are some things that I can't explain to all of you right now. I'm afraid that the Heavenly Tao will detect it. After all, the Heavenly Tao is omnipresent, and the more people know about it, the clearer its senses will be. Believe in me. I'll definitely lead all of you to glory again. If someone else were to say this, everyone would definitely scoff at it. However, this was Enlin, and even though everyone present was a powerful being from a certain tribe or region, they still firmly believed that Enlin could lead them to create miracles. Demon Lord Lingu was even beginning to fantasize about how many eggs he would be able to eat in the future if he followed Enlin. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, Yun Minjing, Michael, Demon Lord Lingu, Demon Emperor Siyu, the Battling Buddha, Lan Xiaoni. They were all members of the God-slaying team. They were going to create miracles again. A pure white ocean appeared before their eyes. A divine tree pierced straight into the heavens, piercing through the dark clouds. And Lin knew that this wasn't the world tree. Instead, it was merely a substitute for the world tree created by the heavenly life god. It didn't have any immortal and eternal characteristics, nor did it have the ability to nurture miracles. It was merely a symbol of the heavenly human tribe headquarters. The heavenly human tribe army of over 100 million resided on the divine tree. There were hundreds of thousands of heavenly human tribe powerful beings patrolling the area in a radius of over 500 kilometers, and all of them were personally led by Heaven Pioneer stage great generals. However, none of them detected the approach of Enlin and the others. Maintain your void body mantra and don't let your guard down. Enlin enshrouded everyone in a layer of black membrane, thereby creating a double layer of concealment. Even the paramount heavenly gods wouldn't be able to detect their presence unless they unleashed detection spell techniques. They slowly moved toward the divine tree. and Lin's eyes suddenly became clear and translucent, and a peculiar ripple proliferated throughout heaven and earth, allowing him to observe everything between heaven and earth. Divine Simulation Technique. This was a spell technique that allowed Lin to sense the workings of heaven and earth to the greatest extent. This was actually just one of the abilities of the paramount heavenly gods of darkness. This was also a secret that Lin had only discovered after attaining the complete divine Tao of darkness. The divine might technique was actually the manifestation of the heavenly god's might. The divine inspection technique was the manifestation of the all-encompassing and omniscient characteristics of the heavenly Tao in order to detect certain objects. The divine plunder technique was the manifestation of the devouring and plundering characteristics of the divine Tao of darkness. The buff technique was the manifestation of the origin energy of the netherworld, which was the manifestation of the power of darkness. There was also the dark immortal transformation, which was the manifestation of the ultimate enhancement technique of the divine Tao of darkness. Of course, this was a high-level mystic technique that utilized the principles of the divine Tao of darkness, which was extremely profound and abstruse. Even at his current level, Lin was still struck by a sense of awe when he turned around and looked at it. As for why the lightning manipulation technique was able to control divine lightning, it was actually because he was using his power of darkness to forcefully interfere with the heavenly Tao. The system's function seemed to be to activate the power of darkness within his body in advance. That's right, he had initially thought that the power bestowed upon him by the system was extremely bad *SS, but was actually just his own power. The system's true function was most likely to screw him over after activating his power. Sigh. The more he thought about it, the more he felt like he had been screwed over. And Lin shook his head and discarded these complicated thoughts. At this moment, he had already gleaned everything through his divine simulation technique. As expected, there are only two paramount heavenly gods on the divine tree. An elated expression gradually appeared on Lin's face. Chapter 2153. Lin was initially a little uncertain, but now he was completely certain. There were only two auras that posed a threat to him at the top of the divine tree. This meant that one of the paramount heavenly gods had gone out for some reason, and that reason was most likely related to how to deal with him. The three paramount heavenly gods are trying to kill me first instead of dealing with the other powerful beings. And Lin chuckled coldly. But they must have forgotten that day and night are different for me. The day was the heavenly light goddess's home turf, while the night was the heavenly darkness god's home turf. And Lin was invincible in the dark. Not to mention, the only source of light in the dark was the light of the stars and the moon, which were also obscured by the dark clouds. Now that everything was in place, and Lin could be said to be at his peak condition, he wouldn't be afraid even if the heavenly light goddess came. The heavenly sea god wanted Lin to deal with the weakened heavenly light goddess. The heavenly sea god's words had to be taken in reverse. The three heavenly gods knew that the heavenly light goddess would become even more powerful after her transformation, and they also knew that this was the best time to deal with her. However, the heavenly life goddess and the heavenly sky god chose not to do so. Why? It was clear that apart from the idea of using the tiger to devour the wolf, they were also confident that they could deal with the heavenly light goddess, whose combat prowess had skyrocketed. Didn't this mean that the three paramount heavenly gods were the most terrifying when they joined forces? Thus, Lin decided to take care of the biggest threat first. The key was how to take care of them. They couldn't just mindlessly charge into the enemy's base camp and kill the commander, right? If things were that simple, there would be no need for this stalemate. Who knew how many terrifying traps were waiting for them at the top of the divine tree? They would be walking right into the trap if they charged in without thinking. There was no way they could win. So what would Lin do? And Lin looked up at the towering divine tree before diving headfirst into the ocean. The members of the Gods of Destruction team dove into the ocean as well, and they disappeared into the darkness of the ocean in no time. And Lin followed the tree of God all the way down to the bottom of the sea diving hundreds of thousands of meters deep. Finally, at the bottom of the tree of God's roots, he saw a glowing green door of light. My dark night has a secret characteristic that not even the heavenly gods know about. That is, every time night descends, I can sense the existence of all enemies. And if I'm unable to sense the existence of the third overgod, it means that the overgod is most likely no longer in this world. And Lin's eyes were dark and deep. He looked at the green door of light and said slowly, "If I want to leave this world, the best place to set up a passageway would be the Heavenly Human Tribe's base camp, which is able to shield me from outside detection." I was indeed unable to detect the existence of this gate between the two worlds, but I can see it now. The ocean has to communicate with me, while the sky is responsible for reconnaissance and divination. As expected, the heavenly life goddess has disappeared this time. A smile appeared on Enlin's face. Everything was under control. Their target was the heavenly life goddess. The battling Buddha, Yun Minjing, and the others were all extremely excited upon seeing the Gate of Light, and they almost couldn't help but exclaim in admiration at Enlin. None of them knew that there was a secret gate here, and this secret gate was actually a gate between the two worlds that led to another world. What did this entail? They knew very well what it meant. Closing the door and beating the dog was their favorite pastime. The battling Buddha was just about to charge in with his staff when he was stopped by Enlin. "Don't worry, there's still a heavenly god guarding the other side. The heavenly life goddess is quite meticulous. Even though she's so well hidden, she still left a heavenly god behind to inform her," Enlin said as he looked at the empty seabed up ahead. Everyone else faltered upon hearing this. They couldn't see any other heavenly gods, and they couldn't even detect any signs of life. If there really is a heavenly god, then we're in trouble. Demon Emperor Cu sighed. Even he was unable to detect the existence of that heavenly god, but he didn't doubt Enlin's words in the slightest. After all, there was no reason for Enlin to lie to them. That's true. Heavenly gods possess extremely powerful immortality, and even gods of creation stage beings are unable to kill them in one go. They have plenty of opportunities to report any sudden developments to the paramount heavenly god. Michael's brows furrowed. "What are you guys talking about?" "I can insta-kill it," Enlin said. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but he suddenly found himself unable to continue. "Everyone, then why are we waiting for you? We'll be watching your performance. Do you need any help?" Yun Minjing seemed to be extremely fond of Enlin's aura, and she took the initiative to lean against Enlin's side. Darkwing shuddered slightly as he asked this. "There's no need. It's just an ordinary heavenly god. All you need to do is follow me closely." Enlin shook his head in a very natural manner. Everyone's heart jolted upon hearing this. What a domineering and powerful man. "Brother Enlin, do you know what kind of heavenly god that is? Why can't I see it with my golden eyes, fiery eyes?" The battling Buddha scratched his bald head in confusion. "It's normal that you can't see it. This heavenly god is far too special. If it weren't for the fact that I possess the power of the heavenly gods, I wouldn't be able to see it either," Enlin replied with a smile. "Its name is Nothingness, and it's also known as the heavenly god Nothingness. It can reduce all existences to nothingness. At the same time, it also exists in the form of nothingness," Enlin explained. Michael was shocked. "They're the heavenly god like this? It's clearly nothingness, so how can it still be referred to as existence?" Yun Minjing was a little perplexed by this heavenly god. Nothingness and existence are contradictory, but it's actually not that difficult to understand. Nothingness is its form of power and life form, while existence is its heavenly Tao characteristic. They can perfectly fuse together. This heavenly god isn't very powerful, so it can't actively attack. It can only exist in the form of a trap and reduce all harmful existences in its path to nothingness. However, its uniqueness is indeed very useful. You can't see it, but it can sense you when you approach it, then engulf you into nothingness. Enlin's inky eyes were still fixed on the empty and lifeless seabed, and a faint smile appeared on his face. All of the other powerful beings shuddered in fear. This ability wasn't just useful, it was terrifying. This was a top-notch trap. If it weren't for the fact that Enlin was here, all of them would have fallen for it, seeing as that heavenly god's existence is nothingness, and it can't be seen or touched. Enlin, how are you going to destroy it? Yun Minjing looked at Enlin with reverence and admiration on her face. Its mistake is that it's facing me. A chaotic black vortex appeared behind Enlin. Darkness spread through the surroundings like ink, and darkness that was deeper than the ocean and more primordial than nothingness surged toward the green door of light at this moment. Why can I kill it so easily? Because I'm its superior. Chapter 2154. Enlin was Heavenly God Void God's superior. He had sensed this the instant he saw Heavenly God Void God. Every paramount Heavenly God had many lackeys under their command. For example, the Heavenly Sea Gods, Heavenly Weather God, Heavenly Mirror God, Heavenly Dark River God, Heavenly Goddess Lanya, Heavenly Liquid God, as well as the Heavenly God of Water, and Lin naturally had his own lackeys as well. However, none of them seemed to have come to join him after his identity had been verified. That's right, none of his lackeys seemed to acknowledge him as their boss. Perhaps it was because he had killed too many heavenly gods, or perhaps it was because he didn't acknowledge the heavenly god's existence in the first place, or perhaps it was because his paramount heavenly god of darkness sounded very evil and villainous, but the righteous heavenly gods were unable to accept this. In any case, not a single heavenly god had come, and Lin didn't really care about this. Thinking back now, Heavenly Goddess Lin, you seem to have been one of his lackeys as well. She had even said that it was a pity that she couldn't see him again with tears in her eyes. He was quite perplexed at the time, but he was starting to understand why now. The heavenly fallen god that had been killed by the Night Monarch was most likely one of his lackeys as well. Even though he had never met him before, as the heavenly darkness god, he had this intuition. His lackeys didn't come to join him, or even his enemies, so Enlin was naturally not going to hold back. He was going to make his lackeys experience the horror of being dominated by their boss. A darkness that was deeper than the ocean and more absolute than nothingness enshrouded the entire space within a radius of several dozen kilometers around the green gate of light. The void that was enveloped within seemed to become unstable due to fear. This was the first time that the battling Buddha and Michael had been so close to the divine Tao of darkness, and they were all extremely astonished by this extreme darkness that threatened to engulf their entire existence. Is the higher-ups really not going to be able to detect such a large-scale attack? Michael was a holy light cultivator, and he couldn't help but tremble at the sight of this darkness. Don't worry, true darkness doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, then no one will be able to detect my presence aside from light. And Lin's lips curled up into a smile. Nothingness was a very hidden power. Empyrean God Void had already confirmed this. As for Enlin, he was even more adept at using his nothingness than Empyrean God Void. He had used his nothingness to conceal his aura, making it so that no Empyrean God would be able to detect what was happening here. Just like that, the darkness kept shrinking toward the green door. Enlin suddenly felt an extremely powerful force of nothingness colliding with his darkness, trying to turn his darkness into nothingness. At the same time, a stream of information flowed with all its might, wanting to transmit information to the higher-ups. Unfortunately, all the information was devoured by Enlin's darkness. Empyrean God Void Form's cries were completely ignored as he was completely sealed. Not only that, but when it channeled all of its power of nothingness into the darkness, it was devoured by another power of nothingness. Moreover, it was turned into nothingness in a mocking manner. Darkness, you're actually the heavenly darkness god. What are you doing here? A terrified voice that was on the verge of breaking down suddenly sounded. Enlin's brows furrowed slightly. Call me heavenly darkness god. Boom! The darkness surged violently toward the center. The heavenly god's anguished wails instantly erupted. You can't kill me. Otherwise, the other paramount heavenly gods won't let you get away with this. Empyrean God's anguished voice was laced with a hint of threat. Enlin couldn't be bothered to respond to him and continued to ensnare him with darkness. Keep screaming. No heavenly god will come to save you even if you scream until your throat is hoarse. A sinister smile appeared on Lin's face as he continued to crush the heavenly god mercilessly. This was an attack that he had unleashed with all of his power of the divine Tao of darkness. Not only was it extremely powerful, but also perfectly nullified all of Empyrean God's powers. Empyrean God didn't even have a chance to call for reinforcements. A series of anguished wails rang out as proof that Empyrean God was still alive. "Ah, heavenly darkness God, I was wrong. Please spare my life. I'll follow you. I'll follow you right now. Can you spare my life?" In the face of Empyrean God's despair, Empyrean God finally lowered his regal head and begged for his life. And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this before continuing his onslaught. He wasn't in a daze because he was hesitant. Rather, he didn't think that his opponent would be so spineless. He didn't have such a spineless underling. So why didn't he learn from his number one underling, Lan Xiaoni? Thus, the area encompassed by the green gate between the two worlds shrank further and further. In the end, Empyrean God's anguished wails reverberated as it shrank to a single point before disappearing. Everything became peaceful again. However, there were still faint specks of light from the shattered divine halos in the ocean. Those were the final pieces of evidence of Empyrean God's existence, but they were instantly engulfed by the darkness in the blink of an eye. The victorious fighting Buddha, Yin Minjing, Demon Emperor Siyu, Demon Lord Lingu, and Mi Jialai were all dumbfounded upon seeing this. Far too brutal, far too terrifying. They could see the shattered specks of light from the divine halos, so they knew that a heavenly god had really been slain. A mighty heavenly god was killed by Lin, just like that. Michael swallowed with astonishment on his face. This is the most straightforward battle I've ever seen in which a heavenly god died. Truly impressive. Even Demon Emperor Siyu, who was accustomed to grand spectacles, found it difficult to conceal his astonishment. Just when everyone thought that this was the end of the battle, the evil-slaying sword on Lin's back suddenly rose into the sky, and a divine light erupted forth as countless thin black lines shot forth to form a massive net that blotted out the entire sky. At that moment, everyone felt as if thousands of wills of the way were surging in the deep sea. Every single black line was an independent and powerful way. They intertwined and connected with each other, forming an unimaginable giant web of the way that wrapped around everything below. And Lin's divine Tao of darkness also fused into the massive net at this moment, elevating its power to a few levels, transforming it into a net of Tao that was capable of binding all Tao. It began to enshroud itself around something before slowly contracting and digesting it. At the same time, a peculiar light flashed on the net of Tao. A thin line suddenly shot forth from the massive net before entangling itself around Lin's wrist. Then, a peculiar light flowed into Lin's body through the massive net like liquid. At this moment, Lin could feel his power of Tao growing at a steady rate. The system interface also began to flash, and Lin opened it to find a few words flashing within. "Congratulations, host. You have obtained the power of nothingness." Immediately afterward, all types of Tao methods and true intent related to nothingness flowed into his mind. And Lin experienced all of this, and the feeling of quickly becoming more powerful. There was only one word screaming in his heart. "Little Xie is bad *s. Chapter 2155. And Lin had killed more heavenly gods than he could count on two hands. However, he could only absorb 7 heavenly gods. The system didn't help him absorb anymore, which was quite a pity to Lin. Only after that did he discover that it wasn't that the system didn't help him absorb the heavenly gods' powers. Instead, the system was filtering out those heavenly gods. In other words, not only was the system not helping him, but it was also causing trouble for him. Of course, there was a reason for this. The system was trying to prevent Lin from absorbing too many heavenly gods' powers and suffering backlash from the heavenly gods' powers. However, Lin's darkness was complete now. After all, He could absorb the power of the heavenly gods without any side effects. In order to become more powerful, this was the only path that he could take. How was he going to get around the system's filtering? This was extremely crucial. Little Xie had once told him that she could block out the system's filtering and help him absorb the heavenly gods' powers in order to increase his Tao power. And Lin didn't believe her initially. The system was so bad *SS. So how could little Xie block out the system's interference? However, he finally realized that he had been wrong. Little Xie wasn't bluffing. She really was bad *SS. And Lin could sense that the heavenly god of nothingness had already fused into his body. Furthermore, his Tao power of darkness had also become more powerful due to the heavenly god of nothingness. That's right, he had become more powerful. This was all due to Little Xie's efforts. Little Xie, you vanquish the heavens and defeat all evil. Ultimate Tao can still be activated on its own. You have the cheek to say that? I saw that you didn't take the initiative to use your ultimate Tao until you killed a heavenly god. So, I expended my essential sword power to help you activate this technique. Little Xie's cold, tender, and extremely displeased voice sounded from within the sword. And Lin realized his mistake, and he scratched his head with an apologetic smile on his face. He had made a promise with Little Xie to use vanquish the heavens and defeat all evil. Ultimate Tao to kill a heavenly god, but Lin was too focused on flexing during the actual battle and forgot about his plan. He really had to reflect on this. Lin was extremely elated. Little Xie really could help him absorb Tao power. Now, many of the ideas he had prepared could be implemented according to the plan. He had to admit that Little Xie had always been a very adorable loli. It was no wonder that he had chosen to keep her as a weapon in his past life. She sure had good foresight. The black net of Tao unleashed by the evil-slaying sword returned to the sword and disappeared. The sword trembled slightly. With a whoosh, it simply turned into a black light and flew back behind Lin. It hovered there quietly as if nothing had happened. And Lin stroked the blade of the sword before injecting a few bursts of divine weapon origin energy into the sword, causing Little Xie to moan in pain. She was finally able to calm down. The battle came to an end, and Lin led the team towards the gate of green light. Yin Minjing and the other big shots followed behind Lin wholeheartedly. And Lin's series of heaven-defying actions gave them a special sense of security. How could they not accomplish something great by following such a big shot? Void darkness projection. A colorless divine halo suddenly appeared above Lin's head, and he waved it gently toward the green gate of light. A dark shadow began to appear before gradually disappearing into nothingness. This is a shadow clone created by imitating Heavenly God Void God's aura. It's identical to Heavenly God Void God and can perfectly evade the detection of the two paramount heavenly gods, and Lin explained with a smile. He already possessed the power of the heavenly gods of nothingness, so it was a piece of cake for him to create a similar fake Heavenly God Void God using the paramount Heavenly God of darkness. The best thing about Heavenly God Void God was that he was very quiet and aloof. He was a heavenly god who was constantly muttering, "You can't see me, you can't see me, you can't see me." Even if a paramount heavenly god were to appear, he wouldn't bother to say anything. Hence, under normal circumstances, the paramount heavenly gods wouldn't bother communicating with Heavenly God Void God. As such, the fake Heavenly God Void God created by Lin would be able to disguise itself very well. All it had to do was remain outside the gate, and it could act as Lin's spy to observe the outside world. Meanwhile, in a world that was filled with lush greenery, a woman with dreamlike beauty had her dark green hair tied up into a bun. Her orange-red eyes were staring at the huge flower in front of her that was emitting boundless vitality. This flower was very strange. At first glance, it was as if it were taking on a new form every single second. The only thing that didn't change was the breathtaking beauty that even made people sink into it. One flower, one world, one instant, one pagoda. Immeasurable life can create a limitless future. After I refine this immeasurable flower, I'll be able to materialize the 3 phases immeasurable fruit, which will provide the reincarnation core for the 3 phases true heavenly reincarnation formation. This woman who is so beautiful that all things in the world paled in comparison was none other than the goddess of life. She had come here to prepare for the 3 heavenly gods to unleash the formation's ultimate weapon. Once the ultimate weapon was formed, there would be no one to fear in this world. The insufferably arrogant heavenly darkness god would be crushed like an ant by them. Even the evolved heavenly light goddess would not be a match for them. She splayed her hands open, and the green divine halo above her head glowed with a brilliant light that almost engulfed the entire heaven and earth. The lustrous green light was imbued with the paramount laws of nature, and it fused into the immeasurable flower, causing its aura to expand explosively and develop at a rapid rate. Flower goddess, wonder god, I'll leave my safety in your hands, the goddess of life said in an indifferent voice. As you wish, a demon made of flowers and vines, shook her graceful body and nodded obediently, standing next to the life goddess to protect her. A monster with lightning in its left hand and flames in its right hand, and its legs were as sharp as divine swords. It had the head of a fiend celestial, and its stomach was filled with chaos. The 2 of them were the goddess of life's personal guardians, and they represented the most powerful beings in the Tao of life. They didn't have the power of the heavenly gods, but they were even more powerful than normal heavenly gods. Not taking into account anything else, even if a paramount heavenly god were to attack, the 2 of them would be able to hold them off for a while. Aside from that, there were all types of rare and exotic flowers and plants in this world, as well as all types of life forms with different functions. Some of them were extremely adorable, while others were unimaginably terrifying. They were all life forms created by the goddess of life. This world was her world of life, and everything here was her little pet. Theoretically speaking, no one would be able to infiltrate this world without anyone noticing, but the goddess of life still brought her most powerful servant here. The goddess of life had thought that everything would go smoothly. However, her expression suddenly shifted drastically after a short while. There were invaders in this world. Chapter 2156. Enlin led the Gods of Destruction team through the gate of the 2 realms smoothly. They had finally arrived at a brand new world. There was a clear blue sky, a boundless green grassland, and a forest. Spiritual aura was abundant. Vital energy turned into mist, and countless colorful auspicious auras turned into clouds. A herd of wild lightning horses with elephant legs and horse bodies galloped across the grassland. Their footsteps sounded like rolling thunder. Suddenly, the ground swelled up, and huge purple flower buds bloomed on the grassland. They bit the galloping wild horses in their mouths, unafraid of the thunder and trampling, and swallowed them into their stomachs. Within the forest, there were little people with butterfly wings playing around in the forest. It was like a forest within a forest, and each of them could use strange magic. In the sky, there were countless heavenly dragons with snake bodies and dragon heads. Occasionally, they would avoid the hunting of mythological beasts that looked like 6-winged rocks but had huge whale mouths. One by one, strange life forms appeared in front of everyone. Almost all of them were races that they had never seen before. The only thing that remained unchanged was that they were all very powerful. There was no doubt that this world was a holy land for cultivation. At the same time, it was also a world full of vitality and miracles. Enlin was just about to unleash his divine sense to survey this world when a huge monkey with a sinister demonic head on its head suddenly appeared from the forest in the distance. It transformed into a bolt of black lightning before turning around and sitting down on Enlin's head with its bright red rear. At this moment, it was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. Moreover, the moment the bright red buttocks landed, the 2 halves of the buttocks suddenly opened, revealing the dense and deep black fangs inside. This devil monkey actually ate people with its butt, and Lin sensed for a while and realized that this world was as wide as a greater world. He quickly came to his senses and looked up, only to see a huge mouth pouncing towards him. No, it should be a red, but with a mouth. He frowned slightly. He did not need to do anything at all. A wave of golden energy shot into the sky and crashed into the devil monkey. The devil monkey screamed, and its body froze for an instant. Then, it was annihilated into particles. What a wicked creature. And Lin shook his head and looked into the distance. I've already sensed her location. Let's go. As he spoke, he turned into a black shadow that was invisible to the naked eye and sped off into the distance. Michael, Demon Lord Lingu, and the others were only barely able to keep up. Everyone flew in this world like a space-splitting divine sword. Everywhere they passed, space would be torn apart due to their terrifying speed. A six-winged giant rock that was hunting a heavenly dragon didn't know what had happened, but its body was torn in half by a sudden force. Its flesh and blood turned into a rain of blood, appearing extremely miserable. The heavenly dragons, who were fleeing in panic a second ago, were even more dumbfounded. After a brief moment of confusion, they looked at the broken bodies falling from the sky, and their eyes became heated. Without saying a word, they opened their bloody mouths towards the broken bodies. From prey, they had become predators, and Lin quickly approached a certain location. He had already sensed her presence. She had definitely sensed his presence as well. He could sense that she was fleeing and constantly on the move. That's good news for me. And Lin's lips curled up slightly. This meant that the goddess of life was afraid of him. Furthermore, she was distracted by something important, and her speed was less than half of the heavenly earth gods. You think you can shake me off with that kind of speed? And Lin chuckled, and his speed increased explosively once again. The battling Buddha and the others really couldn't keep up now. They could only look on as they were left further and further behind by Lin. The story of the hunter and the prey was constantly playing out in this world. However, unbeknownst to the beings of this world, their god of creation was also playing the game of the hunter and the prey. However, the god of creation was playing the role of the prey, and Lin could sense that the distance between them was quickly closing, and he finally caught sight of the heavenly life goddess. She was refining a very strange flower while fleeing with all her might. Beautiful life goddess, we meet again. A smile appeared on Lin's face, but he was pondering how to destroy the flower in the distance. And Lin, how could it be you? How did you know I was here? The goddess of life was even more astonished upon seeing Lin. Others might not know who Lin was, but she was well aware of Lin's true power. This was a terrifying being that even the heavenly earth god was unable to defeat after unleashing his true form of Tao. How could she be any more unlucky than to encounter this god of slaughter during a critical period of refining the immeasurable flower? Why was Lin so persistent? How did I know you were here? I don't know. I was wandering at the bottom of the ocean when I saw a door, so I decided to come in and take a look. So this is your home. As the owner of this place, shouldn't you take good care of your guest? And Lin blinked with a smile. The goddess of life's body trembled with rage upon hearing this. He had clearly come uninvited, yet he was asking her to take care of him? Had he gone insane? Thinking back, the first time they had met was at the heavenly human tribe's breeding grounds. At the time, she had been the dominant figure, while Lin was as obedient as a little white rabbit. Now, this little white rabbit had transformed into a big bad wolf that was trying to kill her. Don't run, life goddess. Aren't you going to buy me a drink or two? Are you busy with your nectar? Do you need my help? And Lin continued to yell at the goddess of life. The goddess of life finally couldn't help but issue a command at the sight of the approaching Lin. Flower goddess, wonder god, take good care of this heavenly darkness god. Yes, great goddess. A voice as clear as a silver bell rang out. In the blink of an eye, a lithe woman constructed from countless flowers and vines appeared before Lin at an incredible speed. She twisted a vine in her hand into a spear before stabbing it viciously toward Lin's chest. 1,000 blossoming flowers, withering spear. The spear was unimaginably withering. As soon as the spear appeared, all life within a radius of a few hundred kilometers withered, as if their vitality had been stripped away. and Lin felt an unimaginable pain in his chest. The part of his indestructible body that was stabbed by the spear was rotting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, the spear began to pierce through. This flower goddess was not simple, and Lin immediately punched toward the flower goddess's face. This punch seemed fast and without any accumulation of power, but if it were to land, even a heavenly god would be severely injured. Puff, puff. Flowers are not flowers. Mist is not mist. You can't hit me. The flower goddess chuckled, and her body suddenly turned into countless petals. And Lin's fist punched through her body, sending countless flower petals flying through the air. Chapter 21:57. And Lin really didn't think that his opponent would be able to dodge his punch. At this moment, a monster with the head of a fiend celestial with lightning in its left hand and flames in its right hand had already appeared behind Lin. It lashed out with both fists, and lightning and flames exploded in unison, creating a massive lightning sun in the air. Boom! And Lin's body was blasted, flying by the fists. The power imbued within the heavenly earth god's eruption made him feel as vast and boundless as the heavenly earth gods. And Lin had only just stabilized his body when a crisp voice sounded beside him. TSK, TSK, TSK. The heavenly darkness god is nothing much. The flower goddess transformed into countless flower petals that enveloped Lin. Each of her flower petals was imbued with a top-tier divine ability. The flower petals landed on Lin's body, and it was as if countless divine abilities had landed mercilessly on his body. His body was engulfed by the boundless divine abilities in the blink of an eye. Did it work? The flower goddess saw the countless flower petals converge, and countless extremely powerful divine abilities were unleashed, bombarding the man in the center. The scene was extremely spectacular, but also extremely cruel. She felt like even a paramount heavenly god would be severely wounded if they were struck by this attack when they were caught off guard. You underestimated us. Now you've suffered. The flower petals materialized into a human figure, and a cold and cruel smile appeared on her face as she looked at the man who was still being bombarded by the divine abilities. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the center. Is this the goddess of life's hospitality? The flower petal welcoming ceremony is indeed not bad. The voice was calm and serene, but it struck the flower goddess with an unimaginable chill. Flower is not flower. Mist is not mist. The flower goddess immediately transformed into countless flower petals in an attempt to get away. However, in the next instant, the darkness engulfed all of the divine abilities flying toward it. It then expanded like an explosion, engulfing the divine abilities, engulfing the space, engulfing the flower petals, and engulfing everything in its path into nothingness. No! Most of the flower petals that the flower goddess transformed into were also engulfed. And Lin walked out from the darkness and looked at the escaping flower goddess with a mocking expression. At this moment, Qi Shun had already appeared in front of Lin, and his silvery white legs slashed down toward Lin's neck like a pair of peerless swords. Die! His legs slashed down, and the void was neatly cut into two halves. Two Dao jades suddenly appeared in Lin's palm. Brother, linear fire. And Lin snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the lightning on Wonder God's left arm and the flames on his right arm exploded at the same time. Boom! Qi Shun's left and right arms exploded simultaneously. With a blood-curdling screech, the wondrous god was engulfed by the destructive lightning and flames before he could even finish his attack. Looking down from the sky, it was like a sea of fire and lightning that covered the entire sky. The power it released was even more terrifying than Wonder God's own attack. And Lin was borrowing Wonder God's flames and lightning to kill him. Phew, what beautiful fireworks. Is this also a welcoming ceremony for the goddess of life? I'll accept it then. I like your hospitality. He smiled and continued to chase after the goddess of life. The goddess of life realized that the two guardians had only been able to stall Lin for a short while. While she was shocked, she was also extremely displeased. Petal shower? Fireworks? Nice hospitality? This was blatant mockery and provocation. This is my world. If I wasn't refining the immeasurable flower, why would I retreat and not dare to fight? If this was any other time, I would definitely make sure that you won't be able to return. The goddess of life hated Enlin so much that she gritted her teeth. However, there was nothing she could do. She could only continue to run. Time. What she needed now was time. Seeing Enlin getting closer and closer, a hint of hatred flashed across the goddess of life's face. No, I can't hesitate like this anymore. Enlin, you force my hand. Creation authority, transfer. Flower goddess, wonder god, stall him for me. The goddess of life roared angrily. Her aura became even weaker. At the same time, a supreme power descended from the sky like holy light. It shone on the charred wonder god and the flower god, who had been corroded by darkness. Instantly, their injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. An aura that was superior to heaven and earth appeared on the two guardians. Enlin's expression changed slightly. At this moment, he felt that two creation gods had suddenly appeared behind him, giving him an extremely strong sense of pressure. A chaotic black shadow tore through the void and caught up to Enlin in the blink of an eye. Wonder God's eyes glowed fiercely. His arms of lightning and flame shot toward Enlin at the same time. He wanted to pay back the humiliation of blowing himself up. Enlin wanted to use the power of the heavenly fire god and the power of the heavenly lightning god to self-detonate like last time, only to find that his powers of the heavenly gods were completely useless. This was because the power of this entire world was supporting the heavenly god in battle, and the entire world was suppressing his powers of the heavenly gods. That's right, this world was declaring its sovereignty. In this world, Wonder God was the highest level of gods. Enlin instantly understood the goddess of life's words. Did the goddess of life make them the supreme gods of this world? Become the gods that controlled everything? All creation gods had a special characteristic. As long as they were in the world they created, their existence was invincible. Everything was under their control. Unless one had the ability to destroy the world they created in one go, there was no way to defeat them. Enlin was still very confused. Wasn't the goddess of life a heavenly god? How could she be able to create a world as a creation god? One had to know that creating a world was the highest form of an intelligent life form. That was clearly something that only cultivators could do. Was she a life form or a supreme heavenly god? No one could answer Enlin's question. Qixin's fist had already landed fiercely. Raging flames and lightning instantly shattered the space within a few dozen kilometers. This time, Enlin really felt a heart-wrenching pain in his chest. His body caved in from the force and energy of Wonder God's fist. With the power of a god of creation and the power of the entire world at his disposal, the power that he could unleash was unimaginably terrifying. Right at this moment, countless withered flowers suddenly fell from the sky. A gargantuan gray tombstone exuding an extremely potent aura of death fell from the sky before crashing into Enlin's head with unerring accuracy. This tombstone was imbued with the power of the entire world, and Enlin felt as if the entire world was being crushed down upon him. Enlin used his divine Tao of darkness without hesitation to devour the tombstone. However, the power of eternal immortality attached to the tombstone was able to resist the invasion of darkness. Not good, boom. Enlin was flattened as he crashed into the ground, pulverizing the earth beneath him. The gray tombstone crushed Enlin into the ground just like that. Countless divine patterns fell from the sky and covered the tombstone. These were the divine seals of heaven and earth. The flower goddess landed gracefully. Countless desolate flower petals fell. The flowers blooming in front of the tombstone are the beauty that you yearned for, she smiled as she looked at the black and white image of Enlin on the tombstone. Withered vine-hunted flowers gently waved her hand, and countless yellow and white flower wreaths appeared on the tombstone. Chapter 21:58. The flower goddess was extremely satisfied with the tombstone before her. Instantly, the ground was filled with vibrant flowers. There were even the chirping of birds and the soaring of immortal sparrows, making this place look like an immortal realm. What a beautiful place! There were free tombstones and free fairyland graveyards. For the heavenly darkness goddess, this could be considered a suitable place to be buried. The flower goddess was extremely confident. The entire world was helping her suppress Enlin. So how was Enlin supposed to escape? Furthermore, there was a black and white photo of Enlin on the tombstone, which meant that she was certain that Enlin was dead. Thus, she was able to use her peerless karma power to erase Enlin's existence and turn Enlin's death into reality. The heavenly life goddess finally heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing Enlin being suppressed. This D** Ned Enlin had finally been subdued. She wasn't as naive as the flower goddess and didn't think that Enlin would be killed by this technique. However, she would be able to restrict Enlin's movements and give her time to refine him. Flower goddess, wonder god, be careful. Enlin is not that easy to deal with, the heavenly life goddess cautioned after a moment of thought. Don't worry, heavenly goddess. He's dead for sure. The flower goddess felt like in her current state, she could control everything in this world. All the living beings in this world were just ants to her. It's a pity that he died before I had a chance to give him a taste of fear and despair, the wonder god said in disappointment. The life goddess, the two guardians she had created were all good, but they had never seen the world. Once they gained control of too much power, they would easily become arrogant. Oh, how many more are coming to deliver themselves to me? The wonder god licked his fanged lips as he looked up into the sky. A few figures exuding powerful auras approached from afar. They were none other than the battling Buddha, Michael, and the others who had been following behind Enlin, but had been mercilessly shaken off by Enlin. Oh well, let this place be their personal graveyard. The goddess of flowers smiled. Her eyes were glistening like peach blossoms. At the same time, the battling Buddhas arrived at the battlefield where Enlin had fought, and they were all stunned by the sight of the gray tombstone, as well as the black and white high-definition photo on the tombstone, as well as the wreaths of different colors. This is Enlin? Could it be that he is dead? No, that can't be. Brother Enlin is so powerful. How could he die just like that? The battling Buddha's eyes had already turned red, and he was clearly convinced. After all, anything could happen in a battle against a paramount heavenly god. And look at the black and white picture on the tombstone. Enlin's death was not peaceful at all. I'm going to avenge Brother Enlin. The battling Buddha raised his golden-banded staff in a fit of rage, and his body instantly transformed into a massive battle divine monkey. Wait, something's not right. A perplexed expression appeared on Demon Emperor Cu's face. Enlin is clearly an enemy, so why would the enemy erect a tombstone for Enlin? The battling Buddha's expression faltered upon hearing this. Why would the enemy erect a tombstone for Enlin after killing Enlin? A respectable enemy? Impossible. This must be a trap. However, right at this moment, before they even had a chance to do anything, Wonder God had already appeared before them, and his fist transformed into fiery lightning that crashed toward the gods of destruction team. You dare to step into the goddess of life's world when you're this weak. Die, all of you. Boom, boom, boom. Extremely terrifying fists fell. The battling Buddha used his staff to meet Wonder God's fist, but the terrifying power imbued within Wonder God's fist traveled along his staff and almost tore his body apart. Demon Emperor Cu was also struck by Wonder God's fist, and he was blasted back several hundred kilometers. He immediately pulled out his gourd and gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine to calm himself down. At this moment, Wonder God turned his attacks toward the others. Regardless of whether it was Heavenly Sun candidate Michael, Yin Minjing who could suppress heavenly gods, or Demon Lord Lingu who could crush heavenly gods, none of them were a match for Wonder God. They were either blasted back by a single punch or severely injured after taking 2 or 3 punches. At this moment, not only did Wonder God possess the combat prowess of a god of creation, but he could also rule over this world. Is this all you've got? This isn't even enough for me to warm up. Wonder God looked at the powerful beings who had been forced into retreat with a disdainful smile. Let's not waste any more time. Let's finish them off in one go, the flower god said indifferently. He clearly didn't think much of these powerful beings. The Flower God was just about to join Wonder God's battle and finish off his enemies in one go. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Thump! The sound of a heartbeat seemed to resonate with the great Tao of heaven and earth. When the sound fell upon the Flower God and Wonder God's minds, they felt an indescribable sense of fear. It was as if they were about to be pulled into a boundless darkness, so dark that they couldn't see any hope. The Flower God's expression changed drastically. "What's that sound?" Then, she seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned to look at the tombstone. At this moment, the suppression runes on the tombstone and the ground suddenly became as black as ink. It was so black that it made people panic. Then it spread in all directions, swallowing the ground, swallowing the flowers, swallowing the tombstone, swallowing everything in its path. Heavenly darkness God? The Flower God's body trembled as she cried out, "Not only did you not die, but you also broke free from the suppression? Impossible! This suppression runes used the power of an entire world. How could you break free just like that?" Crack, boom! The tombstone suddenly collapsed, and Lin slowly walked out from the tombstone. He looked at the black and white photo on the collapsed tombstone and grinned. "Holy sh*t! What the hell are you doing? You even made a dragon out of my funeral? By the way, can you not make me look so hideous in a black and white photo?" Seeing that Lin had broken free from the suppression runes, the Flower God didn't have the time to reply. She immediately attacked Lin again. Countless vines transformed into an azure wood dragon and roared as they pounced toward Lin. "This is the first time I've had a funeral package. I have to say, you've successfully angered me." And Lin sighed lightly and pulled out the evil-slaying sword from his back. Darkness surged onto the blade of the sword, and he slashed toward the Flower God. Heaven and earth suddenly darkened. The Flower God could only feel that everything in front of her was so dark. She was the god of creation, and she controlled the entire world. But in the face of this darkness, she still felt a sense of despair and powerlessness, because this was a darkness that could even swallow the world. Whoosh! Darkness flashed past. The azure wood dragon disappeared without a sound. Then, the Flower God's body was also sliced in half by this sword. There was no pause at all. It was as easy as cutting a piece of butter. Chapter 21:59. One slash, just one slash. Flower God couldn't even block one slash before he was completely swallowed by the darkness. Flower God. Wonder roared in anger when he saw Flower God's death. He turned around and pounced toward Lin. The other members of the God of Destruction team could finally heave a sigh of relief. Lin, its sect leader Lin. "Brother Lin, I thought you were dead. It's great that you're still alive. So powerful." He killed one of the gods with one slash. All of the team members were very elated. They had just been engaged in an extremely arduous battle, but all of them felt an indescribable sense of security upon seeing Lin. Yin Minjing was the first to react. She clutched her chest and said, "Is this what it feels like to rely on someone? I can't believe that I, the Empress of the Dark Elves, would have this kind of feeling for a man. Don't make it sound so ambiguous. You're making things difficult for me." Michael tried his best to maintain his holy and pure appearance. He also had that damned sense of security and dependence. At this moment, Wonder God had already charged in front of Lin. His expression was ferocious and arrogant. The chaotic mouth on his stomach opened wide, and the destructive energy inside could crush anything it touched into a chaotic state. "Lin, I didn't have a chance to let you taste despair last time. Now, I'll let you taste what real. Chi chi chi." Wonder God's ferocious expression was still frozen on his face. Countless black lines had already appeared on his face and body. Those were the marks left by extremely sharp swords. Lin slowly sheathed his sword and shook his head. "You talk too much." Wonder God's body shuddered. His body was instantly cut into countless cubes. Then, the cubes were swallowed by the darkness at the incision and completely disappeared. One slash. Another slash. The Wonder God, who had given the members of the God of Destruction team an immense amount of pressure, had been slain by Lin with a single sword strike. Only at this moment did they truly realize just how powerful Enlin's combat prowess was. They knew that Enlin had created countless miracles, and they also knew that he possessed the power to defeat the paramount heavenly gods. However, they only had a deeper understanding of Enlin's power after experiencing it for themselves. Enlin like this could take on all 10 of them with one hand. A hint of reverence appeared in everyone's eyes as they looked at Enlin. With such an invincible god of war as their team leader, they felt extremely safe. What the hell? Why was there such a special feeling again? Demon Lord Ling Gu, Michael, and the others were stunned for a moment before looking away awkwardly. They definitely couldn't have such a peculiar feeling. It was too strange. Don't just stand there. Let's go after the life goddess, Enlin suddenly said. Everyone nodded in agreement upon hearing this, and their battle intent surged as they chased after Enlin. Enlin was initially planning to transform into a shadow and undergo rapid warp, but a vast number of terrifying vines suddenly appeared out of thin air and bound his body tightly. A burst of heaven and earth-crushing power, as if the entire world was imprisoning Enlin's power, appeared at this moment and completely immobilized him. Enlin was very familiar with this power. This was a power that could only be used by gods of creation in their own world. Sure enough, a woman materialized from vines and flowers appeared before glaring at Enlin with resentment in her eyes. "How dare you kill me? How dare you kill me?" The flower goddess was just about to do something when the darkness tore through the countless vines around Enlin. Then, the vines exploded like a ball, engulfing the flower goddess body, which had turned from resentment to horror. Not even a speck of her remained. However, right at this moment, the wonder god descended from the sky like a bolt of lightning. His feet were the sharpest celestial swords, and he was going to slice Enlin in half. The wonder god's speed was extremely fast, and he didn't waste any words. Enlin hurriedly swung his sword to defend himself. The evil-slaying sword collided with the wonder god's feet, but it was slashed into the ground by the essential sword intent imbued within the wonder god's feet. The wonder god had also been revived. Enlin didn't even have a chance to catch his breath before countless more vines appeared out of thin air and bound toward Enlin's body. Each and every one of the vines had been blessed by the will of the world and were imbued with the paramount sealing power. Is there no end to this? Enlin let loose an enraged roar, and the evil-slaying sword on his back rose into the sky as a black sword intense soared into the sky, pulverizing the vines and slicing the wonder god in half as well. At this moment, the flower goddess had already appeared in the distance. She made a series of hand seals in a frenzy as she prepared to unleash a massive spell technique. Enlin finally understood at this moment that a god of creation was truly invincible in the world they had created. At the very least, he couldn't kill them. They were immortal, and no matter how many times he killed them, this world would revive them. After all, this world was created by them, unless both of them died at the same time. Sect Leader Enlin, we're here to help you. Michael and the others charged toward the flower goddess in an attempt to interrupt her spell technique. I don't need your help. Enlin immediately stopped them. The battling Buddha wasn't happy to hear this. Brother Enlin, don't underestimate our strength. Even though we're not as powerful as you, we can still help you harass and attack your enemies. We can't just come here and be bystanders, right? Of course not. I told you that you don't need my help because I want you to do something else very important. Enlin shook his head. Everyone was elated to hear this. Just tell us what you want us to do. We will definitely go through water and tread on fire, even 10,000 deaths. The members of the God of Destruction team yelled. Enlin looked at the revived wonder god and spoke in a solemn voice. They're definitely trying to hold me back at all costs. Furthermore, gods of creation are extremely fast in this world, and I won't be able to escape from them. Hence, I'll leave the heavy responsibility of hunting down the life goddess to you guys. I'll be responsible for holding them back. Enlin's voice fell. Everyone's expressions froze. WH, what? You want us to chase after the life goddess? Demon Lord Ling Gu was astonished. Are you asking us to die? Michael wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He was already regretting what he had said earlier. He had only just uttered those words, and Lin really did want them to risk their lives for him. I said we're very powerful, but we're not powerful enough to hunt down the life goddess. How arrogant must I be to hunt down the life goddess? The battling Buddha felt like his mind had gone completely blank. There was only one thought in his mind. Lin was trying to kill him. At this moment, Lin's darkness had already clashed with the flower goddess's tornado of flowers. Trust me, the life goddess is currently in a critical period of refinement, and her authority as a god of creation has been transferred. She's at her weakest right now, and she's definitely weaker than the flower goddess and the wonder god. It's time for you to display your true strength as members of the God of Destruction team. Chapter 2160. The members of the God-slaying team were a little more confident after hearing Lin's words of encouragement. However, when they thought about the fact that they were going to hunt down a paramount heavenly god, they felt like they had gotten a little too cocky. If they weren't cocky, how would they dare to do something like this? All right, I'll leave this to sect leader Lin. A determined expression appeared on Demon Emperor Cuyu's face as he immediately agreed. He even gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine as he spoke. He was already in the zone, and if he was given a few more jugs of wine, he would even dare to chase down a paramount heavenly god in perfect condition. All right, I swear on my title as the heaven-crushing sage that I will kill the heavenly life goddess even if I have to die. Sun Wukong gripped his golden-banded staff tightly as he spoke in high spirits. Seeing as that's the case, I'll leave this to Big Brother Lin. A faint smile appeared on Yun Minjing's face as countless black veined patterns began to appear on her semi-transparent wings. Her body transformed into a streak of black light as she flashed toward the direction that the goddess of life had fled in. Demon Lord Ling Gu and Meet Jia Lai also followed suit. They followed the members of the Gods of Destruction team into the distance. They were all determined to die in the pursuit. They had no choice. They were going after a paramount heavenly god, which was a top-tier opponent that they didn't even dare to imagine in the past. Don't even think about interfering with the goddess of life. Qi Shun flew into a rage upon seeing that the members of the god-slaying team were going to chase after the goddess of life. However, when he passed by a certain spatial domain, his body was suddenly engulfed by an invisible power. He let loose a wail of anguish as he hurriedly stopped in his tracks. At this moment, half of his body had already been engulfed by the invisible power, and he was in an extremely sorry state. Did you ask me if you wanted to chase after them? Lin smiled lightly. He had just used the power of nothingness. This kind of power was the easiest to set up when the enemy was defenseless. Myriad flower, heavenly burial. Countless peculiar flower petals fell from the sky, enshrouding Lin's entire body with the essential power of death and decay. A series of chains with malicious ghosts attached to them shot forth from the void and bound Lin's body. A tombstone once again appeared in the sky, falling from the sky. This tombstone was protected by countless flowers, and it seemed to be even more powerful than before. Again, a cold sneer appeared on Lin's face upon seeing this familiar scene. Flowers bloom in front of the grave, the flower goddess sang softly. However, before she could finish singing, she saw a golden fist approaching from afar, tearing apart and annihilating all the flowers of death. It grew larger and larger in her field of vision until it occupied her entire field of vision. Lin held the tombstone with one hand and punched her with the other. The terrifying heaven-crushing true intent that threatened to crush the entire world engulfed her entire body like a boundless tidal wave. Even though she was a god of creation, she was still struck by a sense of horror by this heaven-crushing true intent. Fist of the heavenly Tao. Rumble. Flower God's body was flattened and then torn apart. This was the first time Lin had unleashed the fist of the heavenly Tao after attaining the complete divine Tao of darkness, and it was much more powerful than he had imagined. The more one understood the heavenly Tao, the more one would know how to crush the heavens. And Lin's heaven-crushing techniques had clearly been elevated to the next level after his successful Tao integration stage. Furthermore, this type of spell technique was exceptionally effective in a world created by a god of creation. He could even crush the heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent, let alone the heavenly Tao of a god of creation's world. The flower goddess let loose a blood-curdling wail as she was crushed into nothingness by the fist of the heavenly Tao. This was the scene of the tragic death of a god of creation, and Lin was still holding the tombstone with one hand, so he tossed it toward the place where the flower goddess had died. He even used a spell technique to materialize a black and white image of the flower goddess' terrified expression before her death. The heavenly Tao was a good cycle. Back to the flower goddess. And Lin had initially wanted to offer a flower wreath to the flower goddess, but he decided not to waste any more flowers after thinking that she could still be revived. At this moment, Wonder God transformed into a gust of wind and tried to sneakily evade Lin's detection as he gave chase into the distance. However, Lin's attack was even faster. A dark green light erupted from his fingertip, and a green arrow that could melt even space shot forth before piercing into the center of the gust of wind. Wonder God's body reappeared amid a blood-curdling wail. He had been struck in the back by the arrow, and the poison instantly spread throughout his entire body. This is the most powerful paralysis poison that I've created using my heavenly poison power. It can paralyze a living being's meridians, vital energy, consciousness, everything. And Lin repressed the urge to vomit after unleashing this technique. The heavenly poison god's heavenly poison power had a side effect of vomiting. And Lin was a paramount heavenly god, so he could just barely repress the urge to vomit. However, it was extremely disgusting, which was why Lin rarely used his heavenly poison power. Do you think this little bit of poison can trap me? Wonder God roared with rage, and the entire world tremored in response. A boundless amount of green life force energy flowed into his body from all directions, purifying all of the negative effects within his body. If one arrow isn't enough, then I'll use a few more. And Lin aimed his fingertip at Wonder God and unleashed a few more top-grade poison arrows, all of which pierced into his head, heart, abdomen, and limbs. Wonder God howled with anguish again, and even the world-class purification power was temporarily halted as his consciousness was starting to blur from the poison. Look at you. You're a paramount god of a world, but you can't even instantaneously recover. What a disgrace. And Lin shook his head. He discovered that using spell techniques to trap these two gods was much more comfortable than killing them. After all, the energy expended was on a completely different level. And Lin suddenly missed Tina. As a god of creation, Tina was much more powerful than these two gods. She could instantly transform heaven and earth, grant invincibility buffs, instantly revive, and instantly teleport to any location in this world. If Lin were to face her in the divine mirror world, then he would truly be in despair. However, these two gods had become the masters of this world, so why was there such a massive disparity between them? Could it be that these powers were bestowed upon them by the goddess of life, so they couldn't use them perfectly? Just as Lin was thinking this, the revived flower goddess charged toward him from behind. God of creation technique, heavenly hell flower. She let loose a shrill cry as she raised her hands above her head. A black man-eating flower appeared between heaven and earth, hanging upside down in the sky. The flower bud opened, revealing rows of sharp, scarlet teeth. All kinds of creatures were pierced, their tendons pulled out, their souls tortured, and their bodies burned. The entire flower was shrouded in a concept of origin that was filled with madness and despair. This was a true hell flower. Furthermore, this was a hell flower that was imbued with the will and power of the entire world. It was powerful enough to trap and kill any living being. It unleashed a terrifying aura as it descended toward Lin before biting down on him. Chapter 21:61. The life goddess was still on the run. In the past, she wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Even a day ago, If Enlin dared to come in here, she would have charged up and engaged Enlin in battle. She wouldn't have had to do everything she could to stall him. After obtaining her power of God of creation, the two guardians she had created had lived up to her expectations and were able to hold Enlin off. This was something to be happy about. However, she was no longer happy about it after a minute. She discovered that there were still pursuers chasing after her. Furthermore, there were a few Tao integration stage cultivators chasing after her. She was a paramount heavenly god, but even a Tao integration stage super mighty figure dared to pursue her. The life goddess was struck by an unprecedented sense of humiliation. In the past, she could kill these Tao integration stage cultivators with a single punch. Well, had she ever been chased by a bunch of Tao integration stage cultivators? If word of this got out, the paramount heavenly gods would probably lose all face. They've gone too far. They've gone too far. The life goddess gritted her teeth, and she wanted nothing more than to turn around and beat up those Tao integration stage cultivators. However, she managed to repress her emotions in the end. Even though the life goddess wasn't afraid of them in battle, the most important thing now was to refine the immeasurable flower. Let them chase after her. With her speed, they wouldn't be able to catch up to her anyway. Sure enough, the Gods of Destruction team could only chase after her with much difficulty. Even though they were able to close the distance between them, it was an extremely slow process. At this rate, she would be able to refine the immeasurable flower before they could even catch up to her. The life goddess glanced behind her with her orange eyes, and her perfect body under her light green floral dress began to turn, smiling at the people who were chasing after her. Are you all in such a hurry to die? Get the F***CK out of my world, and you'll still have a chance to live. If I refine the immeasurable flower. The life goddess licked her upper lip with her little pink tongue in an extremely seductive manner, but a killing intent that could freeze the entire heaven and earth flashed through her eyes. Then you'll have to stay in this world forever and be played by me. The God of Destruction team was shocked by the goddess of life's power, but they were not that stupid. They continued to chase after the goddess of life without hesitation. You don't know what's good for you. The life goddess was displeased to see that none of the experts were intimidated by her aura. At this moment, the battling Buddha felt like there was enough distance between them, and he suddenly thrust his golden-banded staff toward the life goddess from afar, upon which his aura was instantly elevated to the extreme. Take this. In an instant, the Jingu Bang shone with golden light. Heaven-crushing true will, which could pierce through the heavens, was unleashed. At the same time, the Jingu Bang was growing at an unimaginable speed. Like lightning and light, it pierced through everything. Even space had to make way for it. That was a speed that could pierce tens of thousands of miles. The battling Buddha unleashed his full power from the get-go, as he knew that his opponent was extremely powerful. The speed at which the Rui Jingu Bang erupted at this moment was much faster than the speed at which the goddess of life was fleeing. Soon, it caught up with the goddess of life and stabbed straight at her slender body. The goddess of life didn't think that her opponent would possess a spell technique with such a long range. One had to realize that she was still several thousand kilometers away from the battling Buddha. She didn't have time to evade, and she could only evade with the immeasurable flower that was in the process of being refined. This attack was very sudden, but with her current powers, evading it was not an issue for her. However, in the next instant, the battling Buddha's pupils contracted, and he roared, "Thicken!" The tip of the Rui Jingu Bang suddenly became extremely thick as soon as the battling Buddha issued his command, and it enshrouded the goddess of life's body once again. It turned out that the battling Buddha was already aware that the goddess of life would evade, so he was holding back and waiting for this moment to unleash a sneak attack. The proud goddess of life was not going to pay any attention to a measly Sun Wukong. Not only was his Rui Jingu Bang expanding, but it was also becoming thicker. She was going to have to pay the price for underestimating him. There was no way for her to evade. She could only stretch out her jade-white palm and slap it, colliding with the extremely thick Jingu Bang that was pressing down like a Vajra Buddha wall. In that instant, She felt as if she could see a golden Buddha that was filled with benevolence and was tall and mighty enough to support heaven and earth pressing down upon her with its 5 fingers. These 5 fingers were imbued with the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, and they encompassed the entire heaven and earth, thereby giving her nowhere to evade. This was the technique that had left the deepest impression on the battling Buddha. He had once been suppressed by this technique for 500 years, but who was he? He was Sun Wukong, the Sun Wukong who was capable of creating miracles in the face of adversity. Wasn't this technique very bad? *SS? Then I'll learn it. 500 years of enlightenment, 50,000 years of enlightenment. Now, he had thoroughly mastered this move and even innovated it, turning it into his own move. Heaven-crushing staff. 5-finger demon suppression. Rumble. An unimaginably terrifying power erupted from the tip of the Rui Jingu Bang, and it was as if all of the power within the Rui Jingu Bang had exploded in that instant, sealing off all of the Goddess of Life's paths of retreat. The Goddess of Life had never expected such a simple-looking attack to be imbued with such immense power and true intent. She was unable to react in time, and she was knocked back by the Rui Jingu Bang. Then, it was as if the Rui Jingu Bang had also slapped her mercilessly into the ground, and it was even about to press her firmly into the ground. You're courting death. The Goddess of Life had never been suppressed by a slap before. This was an extreme humiliation to her. A red light suddenly flashed in her orange eyes, and the extreme power of death instantly tore the golden Buddha Tao realm before her into pieces. Even the tip of the Rui Jingu Bang began to warp and dim, and all of its power instantly dissipated. She had broken through Sun Wukong's most powerful suppression technique, but she was still delayed. The powerful beings of the God of Destruction team were extremely powerful, and the battling Buddha had bought them a moment, which was enough for them to drastically shorten the distance between them and the Goddess of Life. The already completely drunk demon Emperor Yu was the first to reach the Goddess of Life, and his unfathomable drunken demon fists rained down upon her like a series of crimson meteors. The Goddess of Life was unable to ignore Demon Emperor Yu's attacks. This level of attack had already reached the threshold of the God of Creation stage, and it was enough to pose a threat to her. Her body flashed rapidly as she evaded Demon Emperor Yu's torrential attacks. She lightly stomped her foot onto the ground, and countless vines rose from the ground like swimming dragons to accurately capture the elusive Demon Emperor Yu. However, before she could even heave a sigh of relief, Michael was already slashing toward her from behind with his holy sword in hand. The Goddess of Life turned around and slapped her palm toward Michael. It was also at this moment that her killing intent surged. Secret Night Strike, Final Shadow Command. Yun Minjing suddenly appeared in front of the immeasurable flower, and her hand pierced into the immeasurable flower like a bolt of lightning. That's right, her target wasn't the Goddess of Life, but the immeasurable flower that she had refined. The more important something was to her enemy, the more she wanted to destroy it. No, the Goddess of Life's eyes widened in shock. By the time she realized what was happening, it was already too late for her to save the immeasurable flower. Shock and fury finally appeared on her face. Chapter 2162. Yun Minjing was the Dark Knight Fairy Monarch, and she ranked #1 among the heavenly disciple candidates. Her forte lay in combat and assassination. If she unleashed her full power, even a heavenly god would be insta-killed if they were caught off guard, let alone an immeasurable flower. Yun Minjing's final shadow, token tore through the green light that the heavenly life goddess had used to refine the immeasurable flower before stabbing into the core of the immeasurable flower. The immeasurable flower had immeasurable weight and immeasurable state. However, Yun Minjing's final shadow, token, represented the end of eternity. No matter how many states there were, it had to end them all at once. The layers of immeasurable flower states were disappearing. The glowing flower petals were withering at a rate discernible to the naked eye. No, The life goddess turned around frantically. Ignoring the attacks of the others, she directly pounced toward Yun Minjing, who was in front of her, and slapped her palm toward her. Yun Minjing wanted to instantly destroy the immeasurable flower, but to her surprise, the immeasurable flower's life force was even more terrifying than she had imagined. At this moment, the life goddess palm was already upon her. The 5 fingers were pressed together, and they were extremely beautiful. However, she felt as if the entire heavens were roaring and burning with rage. Yun Minjing knew that if she didn't defend herself, she could be killed by that palm. Without thinking, she hurriedly raised her hands in front of her. Boom! Energy exploded, and layers of enormous force came crashing down, directly blasting her away. The life goddess protected the immeasurable flower with all her might, but the attack from behind was already upon her. Demon Emperor Si Yu's intoxicated demonic fist struck her back, making her feel as if her entire body was being torn apart. Mi Jia Lai's holy light tore through her light green floral dress and left a crimson gash on her flawless skin. Demon Lord Ling Gu tossed a red demonic ball into the life goddess's head, transforming the area within a radius of several hundred kilometers into a realm of destruction. A few seconds later, a woman holding a giant flower flew out of the explosion in a sorry state. Her extremely beautiful face was slightly burned, and her body was also covered with wounds of various sizes. She looked especially sorry. All of the Gods of Destruction team were a little dazed upon seeing this. He injured the life goddess just like that? It seemed that Enlin was right. The goddess of life's current state was indeed very weak. She was even weaker than her 2 guardians. Pooh! While flying, the life goddess suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood, and her aura weakened even more. Obviously, her internal injuries were extremely serious. The internal injuries weren't caused by them. Rather, it was caused by the fact that the immeasurable flower had almost been destroyed while the life goddess was refining it, resulting in a severe backlash. Even the immeasurable flower's source was heavily damaged. The life goddess' eyes widened, and she looked at the flower in front of her with incredulity as she fled, as if she still couldn't accept this reality. One had to know that she would not be able to recover in a short period of time if her life force was severely damaged. This would directly affect the power of the tripartite, true heavenly reincarnation formation formed by the 3 supreme heavenly gods. The trump card that she had carefully prepared, the trump card that she had bestowed upon her with boundless hope, had been destroyed by a bunch of Tao integration stage little brothers. One could only imagine how furious and devastated she was. Preposterous! You are challenging my bottom line. The life goddess' entire body was trembling with rage, and the flames of fury burning in her eyes seemed to be able to incinerate everything in the heavens. Enlin had killed her most perfect masterpiece and chopped down her favorite plant, and that had already infuriated her to the point where she was about to start doubting her life. Now, just as she was preparing her final trump card, he suddenly launched a sneak attack to ruin her plans and sent a few minions to hunt her down. She was about to explode on the spot after being insulted and humiliated over and over again. Eat this demonic woman! Sun Wukong arrived again, and his staff extended and thickened before crashing down toward the fleeing life goddess. The life goddess suddenly stopped in her tracks before turning around and raising a hand. The staff came crashing down with unimaginable force, and even the space around it was twisted into a circular arc. However, it was stopped in its tracks by a fair palm. Boom! A shockwave exploded forth. Sun Wukong's hands were numb from the recoil from the golden banded staff. What? His expression faltered as he discovered that the life goddess had caught his full-force staff strike without moving in the slightest. Then, she was looking at him with a pair of extremely terrifying eyes. He had always been a fearless person, not afraid of the celestial emperor, not afraid of Guanyin, not afraid of Buddha. But at this moment, he felt a chill run down his spine because of a woman's gaze. The life goddess raised her eyes. She was clearly the most beautiful face that everyone had ever seen. But at this moment, her anger and ferocity made it impossible for anyone to appreciate her at all. "I've decided," she spoke indifferently as she slowly clenched her 5 fingers. The golden-banded staff trembled violently, and there was a cracking sound. Countless golden cracks appeared on the golden-banded staff and quickly spread across its surface. Sun Wukong was startled and widened his eyes. "My staff." "Your staff?" The life goddess sneered. "No, you don't have your staff anymore." The life goddess clenched her hand hard, and a golden light suddenly shone between heaven and earth. Then there was the sound of something exploding, and the huge staff was squeezed into countless golden fragments. "No, my golden-banded staff." Sun Wukong finally felt an unimaginable sadness. It was the sadness of a fighting friend leaving him. At this moment, the life goddess had already grasped this opportunity and pressed Sun Wukong into the ground. Life seal. A green celestial sword fell from the sky and pierced into Sun Wukong's chest. Immediately afterward, it was as if Sun Wukong's life had been frozen. His aura disappeared, and his movements were frozen. He was like a lifelike statue. Even his expression of sadness had been frozen. At this moment, Demon Lord Ling Gu and Demon Emperor Siyu's attacks had already arrived. Demon Emperor Siyu was responsible for attacking the life goddess, while Demon Lord Ling Gu's attacks were locked onto the immeasurable flower. They had also realized that the immeasurable flower was the life goddess's biggest weakness. They had to target it. However, to their surprise, the life goddess clenched her hand and shrunk the immeasurable flower to the size of her palm. Then, she opened her mouth and swallowed it. Holy F***CK! The 2 true demon tribe, super mighty figures cursed in their hearts. They really didn't think that the life goddess could do this. If she swallowed her own weakness, wouldn't there be no weakness left? There was no problem with this method. At this moment, the attacks of the 2 Dao integration stage demons had already landed. However, they were easily blocked by the life goddess with her hands. Her body didn't even move in the slightest. A cold light flashed in the life goddess' eyes, and a smile appeared on her face. "I've decided, since the refinement has already been interrupted, I might as well make the best of it. I'll delay the refinement and kill all of you annoying flies first." Chapter 2163. Dark clouds obscured the moon and stars. Darkness was the main theme of the Tai Chu continent. The heavenly sea god stood silently at the center of the white nectar sea, monitoring everything above. The heavenly heaven god was situated in the clouds, monitoring everything in the sky. The 2 of them were the true core scouts of the heavenly human tribe base camp. Both the sky and the ocean were monitored by absolute power, and no insect would be able to trespass into their territory. They had the confidence to do so. I wonder when the refinement of the life goddess will be completed. An expression of anticipation appeared on the heavenly sea god's face. Once it's done, we won't have to fear anyone anymore, right? Of course, as long as we can unite as one, regardless of whether it's darkness, light, or any other gods of creation on the Tai Chu continent. All of them will be stomped into the ground by us. The heavenly heaven god was in a good mood, and a warm smile appeared on his face. The 3-phase, true heavenly reincarnation formation is an ultimate weapon that the life goddess and I developed together. It perfectly incorporates the will of the heavenly Tao, the miracle of life, and the infinite cycle of reincarnation. As such, we need 3 paramount heavenly gods to maintain the formation. We were wondering where to find a 3rd paramount heavenly god. Who would have thought that Brother C would know that joining us is the right choice? The heavenly sea god spoke with a serious expression. Everything is for the heavenly Tao. The heavenly heaven god nodded. Everything is for the world. The 2 deities looked at each other and smiled, looking as if they were fighting for the same ideals. By the way, the heavenly darkness god might sneak in tonight. The heavenly heaven god seemed to have thought of something. He, the heavenly darkness god, doesn't dare to sneak in here. Isn't he afraid of being surrounded by 3 paramount heavenly gods? The heavenly sea god wasn't worried at all. He knew Enlin very well, and he definitely wouldn't attack unless he had absolute confidence. Besides, He had reminded Enlin that the heavenly light goddess was currently in a weakened state, so perhaps Enlin was looking for trouble with her. Why would he come to them? The heavenly heaven god thought about it for a moment and also felt that it was quite unlikely. The defenses of their nest were impenetrable. If Enlin really did come here to fight, it was absolutely confident that it would be able to kill him. Enlin was most likely tired of living, which was why he dared to come here. Enlin's life explosion technique was indeed very powerful. It was unbelievably powerful, but didn't Enlin dare to use it? After a series of deductions, the heavenly heaven god was able to determine that Enlin only had one self-detonation opportunity left. When Enlin's body exploded, they couldn't beat him, but they could run. And if Enlin were to use that self-detonation technique, he would be dead. Would someone like Enlin, who cherishes life so much, take the risk to do such a thing? With this in mind, the heavenly heaven god was even more reassured. Of course, the investigation still had to continue. This way, even if Enlin came, they would have enough time to deal with him, right? Time continued to pass slowly. Everything was calm and peaceful. Dark clouds covered the sky. Suddenly, a ray of moonlight shone through the gaps in the clouds and onto the divine tree. The moonlight was not white in color. Instead, it was tinged with a hint of dark red. Unbeknownst to the two paramount gods, a slender figure suddenly appeared in the shadows of the divine tree's lush foliage. She wore a tight-fitting black gauze dress, and her eyes were as red as blood. Even the black gauze dress was unable to conceal her fair and tender skin. Her delicate and beautiful face was filled with indifference and loftiness, as if she was the only existence in the world that could enter her eyes. I'm still not used to this body. The paramount heavenly gods can all sense one another. In particular, my heavenly god attribute is as bright as the sun in the darkness of the night. If I had come here with my previous body, I would have been discovered no matter how much I tried to conceal my aura. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face. However, they would never have thought that I, the heavenly light goddess, would become the moonlit night monarch, the blood moon goddess of the night. That's right, she was the heavenly light goddess who everyone thought was hiding in the eastern heavenly gate, silently undergoing a transformation and becoming more powerful. No one would have thought that she would come to the enemy's base in her weakened state before her transformation was complete. Furthermore, she had even managed to evade the detection of all the heavenly gods. In reality, was she at her weakest state? Not really. However, her transformation was not complete, so this was not her most powerful state. In terms of combat prowess, her current state was about the same as before her transformation. So why did she come here? It was naturally because she knew that she was weak, but she knew that these three enemies were even weaker. It could be said that she was at her weakest state. Everyone knew that the heavenly sea god had yet to recover from his severe injuries. However, through her light factor deduction technique, she could even sense that the heavenly life god had left this world to prepare a very important spell technique. This explained why the three heavenly gods didn't interfere with her transformation. It wasn't as simple as driving the tiger to devour the wolf. They also needed time to prepare. This was an opportunity. The heavenly light goddess instantly understood that this was the most important moment for her to turn the tables. She had to foil the three heavenly gods' plans. Otherwise, her chances of victory in the future would be extremely slim. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. She unleashed her moon perception, and she knew that her divination was correct. The heavenly god above the divine tree was the paramount heavenly god of the sky. The ocean below the divine tree was the paramount heavenly god of the sea. However, the paramount heavenly life god was nowhere to be found. The black-haired woman pressed a hand against the greenish-yellow tree trunk, and her crimson eyes shone with a faint light as she looked down the branch of the divine tree into the deepest part of the white nectar sea. Is she at the bottom of the sea? There's an independent world down there? So, is it better for me to force out the true form of a supreme heavenly god, or to disrupt the goddess of life's secret plan? The woman didn't say whether she could do this or not. Instead, she was hesitating over which path to take. If I force out the true form of a paramount heavenly god, then I'll have to retreat. Once that time passes, the heavenly life god will most likely complete their trump card. If I want to disrupt the heavenly life god's plan, then I'll have to force my way through the gate between the two worlds with the ocean present. When that time comes, even though I'll be able to seize the opportunity to disrupt their plan, there's a very high chance that I'll be surrounded by the three paramount heavenly gods and be forced to reveal my true form. As for trying to sneak into the gate between the two worlds without the other party knowing, there was no way such a person existed in this world. The heavenly light goddess didn't even dare to think about it. Did she really think that the three paramount heavenly gods were pushovers? Apart from scouting the ocean and the sky, they wouldn't leave any tricks up their sleeves. In any case, the heavenly light goddess didn't believe that. So the question was, what should she do? Just as she was hesitating, all of a sudden, something unexpected happened. Chapter 21:64. The white nectar sea suddenly began to surge. The heavenly sea god's enraged voice suddenly sounded from above the ocean. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. What's wrong with this situation? The heavenly heaven god's voice sounded from above. The heavenly sea god asked in an urgent voice, "Do you still remember heavenly god Su Wu's hobby?" "Of course I remember. He really likes to eat fish," the heavenly heaven god replied in an indifferent voice. He clearly didn't know what the heavenly sea god was getting at. "Yes, he likes to eat fish, especially dried fish," the heavenly sea god said. "I had nothing better to do today, so I continued to throw dried fish at heavenly god void god. But guess what happened? It didn't form a life form to eat the dried fish. Instead, it used its power of nothingness to turn the dried fish into nothingness. The heavenly heaven god. That's all. Isn't this abnormal?" The heavenly sea god was extremely excited. This is not in line with heavenly god Su Wu's personality. Maybe he's just tired of eating it. Besides, it still has its incorporeal ability, which can serve as a defensive and warning mechanism. What are you worried about? The heavenly heaven god felt like the heavenly sea god was a complete joke. The heavenly sea god's mouth gaped open, and he felt like this was a little difficult to refute. However, he felt like something was amiss, and he still persisted. Then why doesn't it eat dried fish? What other people want to eat is none of your business. The heavenly sea god was getting a little impatient. He felt like the heavenly sea god was just bored out of his mind. Was this something a paramount heavenly god should be doing? Why didn't he pay attention to the enemy's movements? Why didn't he pay attention to how to improve himself? Why did he have to waste his energy on these minor details? The heavenly sea god was a little reluctant to give up, and he tossed another pile of dried fish toward the gate between the two realms. However, all of them were engulfed by an invisible power as soon as they approached the gate between the two realms. In the past, Empyrean God had transformed into a comical human with a very large mouth for the sake of eating dried fish. Empyrean God's life was very empty. He needed dried fish to replenish his life. Previously, in order to eat dried fish, it even gave up its unfathomable image. How could it give up such an important hobby just like that? The heavenly sea god was perplexed. He felt that he had missed a crucial point. Don't think too much about it. Focus on investigating the surroundings. At this crucial moment, you can't drop the ball. We'll be guarding the divine tree tonight. Even microscopic organisms won't be able to enter our domain, the heavenly heaven god said in a slow voice. The heavenly sea god knew that he couldn't screw up, but what if he had already screwed up? Although it was a small matter, it still gave him a sense of unease. There weren't many beings that could make him feel uneasy. The few gods of creation on the Tai Chu continent could just barely do so, as could Enlil and the heavenly light goddess. But it was impossible for them to come here without anyone noticing. No, the heavenly sea god's body suddenly shuddered, as if he had suddenly realized something. Why is it that whatever I think must be what I think? Don't be limited by your own knowledge. The heavenly sea god suddenly came to a realization. It had to send a voice transmission to Enlil to confirm his current location. That's right, sending a voice transmission to Enlil could also be used to scout the enemy situation. The heavenly sea god immediately used his heart of the ocean to try and establish a connection with Enlil. However, something astonishing happened. The heart of the ocean was unable to establish a connection with Enlil. It could only transmit a single message. Sorry, the person you have dialed is not within the service area. What did he mean by not being in the service area? Its service area was the entire Taichu continent. So if he wasn't within the service area, then he had already left this world. Why would Lin suddenly leave the Taichu continent tonight? Where could he go after leaving the Taichu continent? The heavenly sea god turned toward the gate between the two worlds, and a chill ran down his spine. It couldn't be, was this a coincidence, or was he really in there? If Enlil really was in there, that would explain the strange feeling he was having. It would also explain heavenly god Su Wu's strange behavior. Even though it was very inconceivable, it was very likely that this heavenly god Su Wu was a fake. But how was he supposed to tell the heavenly heaven god about this? What if the heavenly heaven god asked him why he had Enlin's contact information? How was he supposed to explain that? The heavenly sea god was quite distressed, but he knew that he couldn't afford to hesitate. Time was of the essence, and the heavenly life god's refinement absolutely couldn't be interrupted. Heavenly God, I feel like there's something amiss here. My language of the ocean detected a sinister aura from the north, and that aura is resonating with the space around the gate between the two worlds. The heavenly sea god couldn't find a reason, so he could only make up a story. Sinister aura from the north? You mean Enlil? The heavenly heaven god wasn't familiar with the ocean, so he didn't dare to make a judgment on the heavenly sea god. It's very possible. I can only sense that something is amiss. Enlil is more powerful than we imagined, and he might have evaded our detection. I have to test this heavenly god Su Wu to see if he's still the same heavenly god Su Wu. The heavenly sea god spoke with a grave expression. Well, the heavenly heaven god hesitated. Heavenly god Su Wu was a subordinate of the goddess of life. If they tried to kill his subordinate without any evidence, wouldn't that be a slap to the goddess of life's face? What if heavenly god Su Wu was completely fine, but the ocean forced him to go on strike? The heavenly heaven god didn't agree, nor did he object. The heavenly sea god knew that time was of the essence, so he took it as a tacit agreement. He immediately waved his arms toward heavenly god Su Wu, and boundless ocean pressure crashed toward the gate between the two worlds. The power of the entire white nectar sea was being drawn upon by the heavenly sea god, and the liquid in the core of the sea was even glowing with an eternal golden light. Su Wu continued to devour, but the amount of seawater surging toward him was simply too terrifying. The seawater, which was imbued with the paramount power of the heavenly gods, made him feel extremely bloated. In particular, the golden seawater was giving him indigestion, and it was constantly crashing into the space around him. PFFF. Su Wu was suddenly blasted apart by seawater. A cloud of black mist exploded outside the gate between the two worlds before completely disappearing. The heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god both drew a sharp intake of breath upon seeing this. Why was it black mist? Heavenly god Su Wu had been attacked, so why wasn't he saying anything? At this moment, both of the utmost beings thought of a possibility that was extremely shocking to them. An enemy had already entered the gate between the two worlds. Right at this moment, the gate between the two worlds suddenly lit up. A monster with a massive pink flower on its head and a six-legged demonic body ran out from the gate between the two worlds before exclaiming with ecstasy, "I'm finally out. I didn't die. I wasn't killed by an invisible power as soon as I came out. I can finally report this to the paramount heavenly gods." In contrast to the monster's elation, the two paramount heavenly gods had fallen into a deathly silence, unable to bring themselves to smile. Chapter 2165. The emptiness of the two-realm gate was not emptiness god at all. This was a fake heavenly god Su Wu. Not only was he trying to deceive the two paramount heavenly gods, but he was also trying to kill all of the living beings who had come from the goddess of life's world to inform him of this. What a killing two birds with one stone. To think that he would screw both us and the goddess of life over. A thunderous rumble erupted in the sky. At this moment, the monster that had escaped from the gate of the two realms was already yelling at the top of its lungs. Hua Xianfeng of the 108 living beings of the goddess of life, I have an urgent matter to report to the paramount heavenly god. As soon as its voice fell, a water humanoid constructed from a deep blue liquid appeared before Hua Xianfeng with a dark expression. I am a sea god. What happened in there? Hua Xianfeng immediately fell to his knees with tears streaming down his face. Heavenly Sea God, bad news. The Heavenly Darkness God has led a group of Tao integration stage powerful beings into the Goddess of Life's world in an attempt to foil her refinement plan. The two paramount heavenly gods were both astonished upon hearing this. It really was Enlin. Even though they were already mentally prepared, they were still struck by a sense of incredulity and absurdity. How did Enlin know that the heavenly life goddess was going to refine the immeasurable flower today? And how did he manage to sneak into the gate of the two realms? Was he really that unfathomable and invincible? They had just said that not even a single microscopic organism could enter, but reality had just given them a tight slap in the face. Not only had Enlin entered, but he had also brought a bunch of Tao integration stage powerful beings with him, and the Heavenly Sea God and the Heavenly Sea God were completely oblivious. We have to reinforce them right away. By the way, is the Goddess of Life, all right? Enlin is trying to foil her plan. Did she try to stall Enlin? The Heavenly Sea God suddenly asked. Enlin is being held back by her guardians, Hua Xianfeng replied. The two paramount heavenly gods heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. Thankfully, things were not as bad as they had thought. However, her refinement process of the immeasurable flower was disrupted by those Tao integration stage cultivators. The immeasurable flower's essence was severely damaged, and the life goddess also suffered a backlash, Hua Xianfeng continued. The heavenly heaven god. The heavenly sea god felt a rush of dizziness. The two gods experienced the feeling of falling from the mortal world to hell, flying from hell to heaven, and falling from heaven to hell again. The heavenly sea god really wanted to slap Hua Xianfeng to death. Can't you King finish your sentence at once? It's too late to say anything now. Let's go in immediately. And Lin dared to ruin our plan. We'll definitely make sure he doesn't return alive. The heavenly heaven god's head suddenly appeared at the bottom of the ocean, and an unimaginably terrifying aura burst forth. Even a powerful Hua Xianfeng collapsed to the ground and trembled uncontrollably. He didn't dare to move or speak. I really didn't expect that Enlin would really dare to do it. Is he not afraid of death? Let's go in and kill him right now. The heavenly sea god was truly enraged. He really didn't think that Enlin would dare to do something like this. He had almost fooled the two paramount heavenly gods, and most importantly, he had successfully foiled their plan. Whoosh whoosh. Two streaks of light imbued with boundless killing intent flew toward the gate between the two realms. They were going to make Enlin pay. However, right at this moment, a crimson moon suddenly tore through the clouds. The long-awaited sight of the twin moons in the sky appeared once again. A dark red saber projection suddenly tore the entire white nectar sea in half. The extreme sharpness of the saber projection sliced through the ocean before striking the bottom of the ocean. If it weren't for the fact that the heavenly sea god and the heavenly sea god had stopped in time, this attack would have struck them with unerring accuracy. The heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god had no choice but to evade this attack as they sensed an extremely dangerous premonition. Boom! The saber projection sliced through the seabed, and a deep, dark fissure was sliced open. Who dares to stop me? The heavenly heaven god roared with rage. Before the dark red moon energy had even dissipated, a beautiful black figure slowly appeared. This was an exquisitely beautiful woman with long black hair that extended all the way down to her bare feet. She walked out from the fissure of energy, and the most eye-catching thing about her was the crimson crescent scythe hovering behind her. There was a boundless divine light imbued within her eyes as she looked at the two heavenly gods before her with a mocking expression. The two paramount heavenly gods were both a little dumbstruck at the sight of this woman. "Who are you?" the heavenly sea god asked with a grave expression. "What? You don't recognize me now that I've changed my face?" The woman looked at the heavenly sea god with a hint of a smile on her face. "You're the Dark-Winged Tribe's moonlit night monarch?" The heavenly heaven god's expression shifted upon seeing this. "Didn't you already perish?" "No, it's definitely not her. Even if the moonlit night monarch didn't perish, there's no way she could be this powerful." The heavenly sea god shook his head as he looked at the woman before him. For some reason, he was struck by a sense of extreme danger. That's all right. You'll soon find out who I am." The black-haired woman turned to the heavenly sea god with a meaningful smile. "Who would have thought that Enlin would be so powerful? He's even faster than me and has foiled your plans. That's good news. I was struggling to decide which choice to make, but there's no need to think about it now. I'll just have to choose to take your lives." Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly crashed toward the woman from either side. Two massive palms viciously swatted toward the center, as if they were swatting a tiny black mosquito. Insolence! Great heavenly cloud palms! Boom! The two palms fell. The paramount heavenly god unleashed its full power. The seawater within a radius of over 500 kilometers was compressed into a vacuum. Hua Xianfeng was also severely wounded by the shockwaves from the sudden attack. However, when the attack subsided, a semi-transparent red moon barrier constructed from the energy of the true moon had already enshrouded the woman's body, thereby allowing her to remain completely unscathed in the face of the heavenly heaven god's attack. The heavenly heaven god's expression shifted drastically. There was still a being in this world who could remain unscathed after taking a full force attack from the heavenly heaven god. At this moment, the heavenly sea god had already summoned countless tons of seawater to crash down upon the woman. The seawater was imbued with the paramount power of the law of corrosion, and everything in its wake was reduced to sand and sand. The black-haired woman reached behind her and gripped onto her scythe. In that instant, it was as if a crimson crescent moon had appeared at the bottom of the ocean, slicing all of the seawater in its wake in half. The heavenly sea god's heart jolted. At this moment, the black-haired woman had already appeared before the heavenly sea god at an incredible speed. The crescent moon scythe in her hand had already appeared behind the heavenly sea god, and the sharp blade of the scythe instantly slashed toward his neck. Heavenly golden wall. An indestructible wall of the ocean suddenly appeared behind the heavenly sea god. The wall of water appeared to be very thin, but it was imbued with the boundless power of the ocean, thereby nullifying all attacks. Sure enough, the sharp scythe crashed into the wall of water, but it was unable to break through the wall of water. However, the heavenly sea god didn't even have a chance to heave a sigh of relief. An unimaginable light suddenly erupted from the blade of the scythe. This was a light that was capable of piercing through and purifying all things. The heavenly golden wall had been torn apart. This was because his opponent's attack was powerful enough to tear apart the entire ocean. The heavenly sea god suddenly realized who his opponent was, and an expression of shock appeared on his face. However, he didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence before his head was sliced off by the scythe. Chapter 2166. The woman in the black dress severed the heavenly sea god's head. She was not satisfied, and she still wanted to stab him a few more times. However, at this moment, an omnipresent power that was even more vast and boundless than the ocean appeared and crashed into her back, sending her flying for several hundred kilometers. A gigantic head of white clouds and mist stared intently at the woman. "Heavenly light goddess, it's actually you." Its voice was filled with rage and astonishment. "It's me. What, are you surprised?" The woman turned around with a faint smile as she wiped the blood from the corners of her lips. The heavenly heaven god's attacks were all-encompassing, so there was no way for her to dodge. As such, she could only take the attacks head-on. "I'm very surprised that you've fallen, light goddess." You're no longer a high and mighty being filled with hope and future. Your body is now filled with impurities. The heavenly heaven god spoke in a complex voice. The woman in the black dress looked down at her snowy white skin, which was so beautiful that it didn't seem like a mortal being. How am I filled with impurities? This body is very beautiful and very clean. As long as there is light in your heart, then everything will be flawless. Light? Who would have thought that you would still choose this path? A water humanoid materialized in the distance. It was none other than the decapitated heavenly sea god. That's right. I have to admit that the method you developed to return the powers of the heavenly gods to living beings on the Tai Chu continent is extremely beneficial for improving one's combat prowess. The heavenly light goddess lips curled up into a faint smile. It's a pity that you gave the power of the heavenly gods to life, while I gave the power of life to the heavenly gods. That's the difference in intelligence. The heavenly sea god shuddered upon hearing this. Lan Xiaoni didn't listen to him, and she even smashed his door. This was the most painful experience of his life, and it could be said that he had been thoroughly humiliated. The goddess of light's words were clearly making fun of him. The heavenly sea god clenched his fists in rage. Bai Qianghai roared with rage. This was his majestic will, a will that could affect the entire world. He wanted to attack, but he quickly calmed himself down and a smile appeared on his face. Light, I know you hate me, but I had no other choice. Didn't you come here to ruin our plan? Now, let me tell you, you succeeded. We can't fight against you at all. However, Enlin is different. Enlin's potential is extremely terrifying. If you don't stop him, he will definitely grow into your greatest threat. Why don't we shake hands and make peace first, then join forces to deal with Enlin? As soon as these words came out, the goddess of light, who had maintained a calm smile, was startled. The heavenly heaven god took a meaningful glance at the heavenly sea god. The heavenly sea god's enemies were already here to exact revenge, but he still had the courage to invite his enemies to join forces against another enemy. The heavenly sea god sure was shameless. More importantly, the reason he gave was so reasonable. The heavenly heaven god only wanted to say, "Awesome." This kind of operation could only be done by someone who had achieved great things. A smile appeared on the heavenly light goddess face. Seeing you like this, I seem to understand why you betrayed us. What do you think of my suggestion? The heavenly sea god asked. I refuse. The heavenly light goddess replied without hesitation. The heavenly sea god was a little perplexed. Why would you refuse? You should know that cooperating with us now is the best way to get rid of one of our greatest obstacles in the future. I don't have that many reasons. I refuse because I feel like I'll feel better if I beat you up first. The woman raised her crimson moon scythe again. I have absolute confidence in killing you and in Lin, so I don't need to cooperate with you. She charged toward the heavenly sea god as she spoke. F*CK. She's insane. The heavenly sea god's expression shifted drastically, and he immediately unleashed the power of the white nectar sea toward the woman. The white nectar sea was the central sea of the Tai Chu continent, and it possessed the core power of the ocean. The heavenly sea god could utilize this power to the fullest, so the woman was facing unimaginable pressure. However, the woman wielding the scythe continued onward toward the heavenly sea god with unstoppable force. The true intent of the red moon imbued within the scythe was only the surface. What was even more terrifying was the power of light imbued within the scythe. Even for the heavenly sea god, this was extremely terrifying. Help me, heavenly sea god. The heavenly sea god yelled. Needless to say, the heavenly heaven god opened his mouth, upon which a circular spatial cannon shot forth from his mouth. This was not a simple spatial cannon. Instead, it was a top-notch spatial cannon that could split countless dimensions. It had the ability to slice, confuse, annihilate, and collapse dimensions. However, what the heavenly heaven god didn't expect was that the woman was able to slice the spatial cannon in half with a single slash of her scythe. All of the cracks and collapses in the dimension were reduced to stable particles of light by the golden light of her blade. This cold and gentle-looking woman, on the surface, was the moon goddess who dominated the night and slaughtered, but in reality, she was the great goddess of light and justice. These two extremely contradictory characteristics were perfectly fused together in this woman's body. I'm going to kill you, but I'm doing this for your own good, as I'm purifying you. The goddess of light's power was extremely domineering, and she tore through the heavenly heaven god's attack before charging toward the heavenly sea god like an invincible goddess of war. Myriad realms' divine source, golden sea of swords. The heavenly sea god took advantage of the split second the heavenly heaven god had bought to materialize billions of terrifying golden swords in the ocean. At first glance, it looked like a golden ocean, shining with dazzling sword light. They transformed into countless streaks of destructive golden light that surged toward the woman in black. Each and every one of them possessed the paramount true intent of the ocean, which was enough to strike fear into the hearts of all-powerful beings. Now that countless golden ocean swords had converged together, the power unleashed by them was simply unimaginable. Only the woman standing alone in the ocean could experience this terrifying power for herself. Come at me. The heavenly light goddess slashed her scythe forward again. This time, a divine pattern even appeared on her forehead as she unleashed all of her power. The crimson crescent pierced through the ocean for over 500 kilometers before crashing into the countless golden swords, causing the ocean water to explode and vanish. There was no end to the golden swords. All of a sudden, the crimson crescent could no longer contain itself, and it transformed into a dazzling light that illuminated the entire world. Boom! The golden light tore through the white nectar sea. It tore through the dense dark clouds in the sky and brought light to the entire world. An earth-shattering tsunami swept through the white nectar sea. All of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings were dumbstruck. The heavenly gods were also dumbstruck. They stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before their eyes with only one thought in their minds. Was the white nectar sea going to be blasted by light?